Welcome to Fantasy Audiobook. As a villain, I really can't become stronger anymore. Chapter 81. What's my advantage? These words made Lydia frown slightly, always feeling inexplicable and unknown. The witch is very powerful. However, it does not mean invincible. However, Melville's analysis is not unreasonable. 3 executioners, 13 secret guards in golden robes, plus Melville, the best genius in the Copperfield family for a century, and himself, a witch, no matter from which aspect. Look, this is a very powerful force. It is impossible to lose unless Ron is surrounded by super experts from the royal family or the church headquarters. However, so far, there are no traces of this. There are indeed a lot of outsiders in Larnaca City, and some of them are quite good, but the targets of these people should be the Thunderfire sword that has been strengthened and increased by 10 from the Bohemia auction. Dolores concealed her identity and lived in the Sykes Hotel. Otherwise, with the dignity of the princess, she should live in the city lord's palace. And Christian even concealed his whereabouts and showed up at the church branch. There are not many saints here, so it is normal that Melville failed to find out the news. Gather people, sneak across the border, and sneak into Larnaca. So far, the whole plan is going very smoothly. There is only one last step left: kill Ron. Once Ron leaves the church, it will be his death. However, Lydia doesn't know why, but she always feels inexplicably uneasy. This feeling is very shallow, but it has been lingering in my mind for a long time. This strange feeling made Lydia a little more confused and even afraid about the future. Melville, I heard that Ron is called a prophet by the Dawn Goddess Church. Suddenly, Lydia spoke. If he is really a prophet, will he know our plan in advance? Oh, Your Royal Highness the Third Princess, Melville said in a long voice. Believe me, this is definitely a rumor. My brother is just a stupid, dull ancient scholar. In his eyes, those rusty iron pieces, dusty slates, and parchment that will break with the slightest touch are better than being stripped naked. Beautiful women in clothes attract his attention more. He put all his energy into those antiques that should have been buried underground. When I was still in the family, I felt that if I have a sister-in-law in the future, it is very likely that she will be someone who has written all over the world. A bronze with ancient writing, or a roll of parchment with mysterious symbols drawn on it. He has almost no desire for power. If it weren't for the family's request, he wouldn't even get involved in magic, even though he has no talent in this area. As for the prophet, what a mysterious and powerful existence he is. How could he have such power? What's more, what is a prophet? A prophet is one who can see into the future. Even if my brother becomes enlightened one day, I feel that he is more likely to have the ability to interpret the past rather than see into the future. Miss Witch, you can think about it again. If he is really a prophet and already knows the future, what will happen? The city guards of Larnaca City and the priests of the Church of the Dawn Goddess should have surrounded this place long ago, instead of being as calm as it is now. Melville shrugged and said, rather than him being a prophet, I think it is more likely that he is my brother. During archaeology, some special documents were discovered, which recorded some predictions about the future, such as Archibald's notes. Although I hate that guy, I also admit that he is indeed very capable in the study of ancient characters, and it is not impossible to interpret these ancient books. Then, this despicable and shameless guy used these things to deceive a group of clergymen and became the so-called prophet. After all, the people in Granville are almost all idiots, and it is normal for them to be deceived. Although there was no substantial evidence, Melville's inference seemed reasonable, and the panic in Lydia's heart dissipated a little. The corners of her mouth turned up in a graceful arc. Maybe, I really am worrying too much. However, neither Lydia, who is a witch, nor Melville, who is the legitimate son of the Copperfield family, noticed an invisible trace just 1 meter away from the window in front of Lydia. Gone in a flash. That existence has power that even the witch cannot detect. At this moment, Lydia's body trembled suddenly. A flush spread across his face. The familiar burning sensation was spreading from his lower abdomen. She felt that her legs were being forcefully separated by some brutal force. A layer of mist quickly filled her eyes. The impact of that moment made Lydia completely unable to suppress it. She almost used up all her willpower to barely maintain her image from collapse. Melville, I want to take a rest. You leave first. Melville's expression also changed slightly. He could sense that something was wrong with Her Majesty the Witch. Instead of leaving, he even took a step forward. Your Majesty the Witch, what are you doing? Seeing Melville getting closer, Lydia felt intense irritation and shame in her heart. Get out. Melville's body suddenly stayed in place, his head lowered, and his eyes filled with intense anger. Both of his fists clenched subconsciously. After a few seconds, Melville let out a deep breath, then take a good rest. Without saying a word, Melville turned and left. After Melville disappeared, Lydia couldn't bear it anymore. Even if she covered her mouth with a small hand, the graceful voice still escaped from her fingers uncontrollably. This idiot here again. Doesn't he need a rest? If this continues, she will break. The Sykes Hotel. Dolores' room. A woman wearing armor appears out of thin air. Dolores had long been accustomed to this situation and did not show any surprise. Her eyes fell on the woman, with an innocent smile on her face. Only in front of this woman will she show her side as a girl. The mysterious woman wore a silver mask on her face, and the mask was engraved with a sky full of stars, so that no one could see what she looked like. She did not whet her appetite, and quickly told Dolores the information she heard. The smile on the face of the eldest princess remained unchanged. Sure enough, the first ones who couldn't bear it were the group of barbarians from the Spang theocracy. Their movements were a little faster than I thought. The dragon clan perished. At dusk, strife in the continent is coming. This is something that she, a woman, can see, but almost all the nobles in the Qinsheng kingdom are unaware of this. In order to have an excuse to stir up trouble, sacrificing the eldest son of a Grand Duke is really something that the Spang theocracy can do. A witch, a heroic knight, 3 executioners, and 13 gilded guards. It's really expensive, Dolores complained in a low voice. Do you want me to kill them all? The female warrior in armor spoke again, her voice cold and slightly hoarse. Even though there was a witch on the other side, this female warrior obviously didn't take it seriously. Oh, no need, my good sister, don't be so anxious. The smile on Dolores' face became sweeter and sweeter. She looked at the female warrior opposite with joy. Do you know what kind of kindness is the most precious in the world? It's a life-saving grace. It would be no problem to kill all these people directly, but, suddenly appearing when Ron was assassinated and in danger, and saving Ron's life, would obviously gain Ron's gratitude even more. She hoped to tie Ron, the prophet, to the royal warship. In order to achieve this goal, it doesn't matter even if she marries Ron. After all, the prophet can affect the situation of the entire Twilight continent. Send an invitation to the church for me. The ridiculous second half of the night, or morning, was over. A night of exchanges between import and export did not make Ron feel tired. On the contrary, he felt relaxed and happy. The depression accumulated in his chest seemed to be swept away, leaving Ron feeling refreshed. Ron was happy, but he didn't know about a certain witch because he couldn't sleep well all night. Ron, who had just finished washing, put on formal clothes. It is still a pure white priest's robe, which looks very sacred at first glance. After all, he is a professional pastor certified by the church, with a certificate. Looking towards the bed, the smooth bodies of Aurelia and Serafina appeared in front of them, their long white and tender legs overlapped, and their long silver and ocean blue hair intertwined together. Seeing that scene, Ron became impulsive again. He seemed to have endless energy, and no matter what, he would never feel tired, at least, in this aspect. Ron thought of what Celios said. Could it be that the blessing given to him by this god of love was the ability in this area? He likes this blessing. Shaking his head, Ron murmured in his heart, pulled up the quilt, covered the 2 girls' beautiful bodies, and immediately walked out the door. It wasn't that the 2 girls were not attractive enough, it was just that Ron was worried about them. Your body may not be able to bear it. Perhaps because it was Serafina's first time, she was a heroic female knight, but her ability to withstand in bed was much inferior to that of Aurelia. After closing the door and walking out of the room, the bright sunlight shone on his body, making his whole body feel warm. The sunlight even made Ron feel a little dazzling. There was a sound of footsteps in front of me, and when I looked up, it was Virgil. It can be seen that Virgil's life seems to be quite good during this period, and Ron feels that this guy seems to have gained weight. His ambiguous eyes glanced at the closed door behind him. Just by looking at the expression on Ron's face, Virgil knew that his good brother had just spent an unforgettable night. This is for you. Virgil threw a letter to Ron. After taking a look at the text on the letter, Ron already knew who the letter was from. Are you going to go to the appointment? Do you want me to arrange for some experts to follow you? Virgil said in a deep voice. It was originally the most appropriate task to hand over the task of protecting Ron to Serafina. But now, Larnaca's pearl may be dim and needs a rest. Recently, there have been some subtle developments in your hometown, Spang Theocracy. I got the news from Isaiah that Spang Theocracy and the Heart of Nature Church are inquiring about you. Virgil said. Ron smiled slightly. It seems that you succeeded. Of course, the spell you taught me has incredible and wonderful effects. Virgil said happily. When I told Isaiah, you don't want anything to happen to your brother, she immediately gave in, even in her imagination. Keep it simple. As he spoke, Virgil stretched out his hand and pressed his waist. Isaiah's submission made him very happy, but it also brought some bad effects. For example, the kidneys seemed to be a little overdrawn. The looming pain. Because of this, he admired Ron even more. This guy seemed to have endless energy. That's good. Ron nodded. The two men looked at each other and could feel the slightly dirty smile in each other's eyes. Ahem, but there's no need to go to so much trouble. Don't worry, I know what's going on. Now that Ron has said so, Virgil no longer insists. After all, this is a prophet, and he is far better at controlling the future than he is. By the way, brother. Ron seemed to suddenly remember something and handed a note to Virgil. Virgil took it and saw that there were some ingredients for the potion written on the note. This is a special magic potion. Some of the ingredients are hard to buy on the market, but the church's pharmacy should have some in stock. Please help me get some. As for the efficacy, wait until I get the potion out. Tell you, Ron explained. Virgil nodded without asking much. He is very smart, Ron is a prophet, and now he has the great Saint Christian as his backer. Virgil will naturally tie himself firmly to this warship. After saying goodbye to Virgil, Ron walked out of the church. Dolores is already here. According to the plot in the game, when the princess realizes the powerful strength of the character played by the player, she will take the initiative to propose marriage. This has nothing to do with the strategy, it is just a marriage born purely out of the exchange of interests. There are no players in this real world, but he is the prophet. A plan has slowly taken shape in Ron's mind. He didn't know what changes would happen if the repairman once again closed the world line, and what kind of designs would be made for him, the little villain who had bugs and should have died long ago. Unable to take targeted measures, Ron still had his own choice. Perhaps, he could take the initiative. He wanted to see how the repairman would respond when he turned the whole world upside down and made all the arcs of fate go wrong. And Dolores is a pretty good target. As he walked, Ron was refining the plan in his mind. Just as he was passing by the churchyard, Ron suddenly stopped and stared at the statue of the goddess of dawn in front of him. He frowned. He always felt that this sculpture was perfectly carved. The statue of the goddess seemed to have become dim and dull, far less agile than when I first saw it. He subconsciously stretched out his hand and rubbed his fingers along the stone statue. The texture was rough. When Ron took back his hand, there was a layer of gray on the pads of his fingers. The statue of the goddess of dawn is declining and decaying. The scene of the dawn goddess digging out the heart with her own hands was once again played in front of Ron, and the last voice of the dawn goddess echoed in his ears. Don't forget me. Looking at the church again, Ron felt an inexplicable coldness despite the scorching sun above his head, as if this sacred realm was no longer protected by the goddess. Ron's heart trembled slightly. Could it be that the goddess of dawn has? But soon, Ron shook his head vigorously and threw away the thoughts that suddenly appeared in his mind. At least, the soul of the goddess of dawn was not found on the soul boat. Ostara did not fly into the sky and turn into a bright star like Celios. Perhaps the dawn goddess just fell into some special state, such as being sealed. Silence. Suspended animation. Don't forget what I mean, I actually hope that I can wake her up one day in the future. Ron stayed in front of the statue of the goddess for a long time before gradually leaving. Outside the church, the scene in Larnaca even made Ron feel a little strange. The city was far more prosperous than before. The threats from the young gods and black beasts did not seem to pose any threat to the city. Virgil handled it very well. Along the way, one could see many nobles in gorgeous attires and practitioners with considerable strength. After thinking about it for a moment, Ron knew in his heart that most of these people were looking at the Thunderfire sword. It seems that Logan's guy really didn't deceive himself. The publicity effect of the Bohemia auction is really not very good. With so many competitors, Ron has even begun to look forward to what price the Thunderfire sword can be sold for. Although the city of Larnaca is now closed, just like the great Saint Christian, this small city does not dare to block the entry of those nobles and big shots. There was a smile on Luo's lips. He walked quietly on the street, his ears filled with noisy sounds, the shouts of hawkers, the arguments over bargaining. Very noisy. However, he didn't hate this feeling of life. This would give Ron a strong sense of reality. Ron bought a piece of bread, tore off a piece, stuffed it into his mouth, and chewed it. Inadvertently, a figure appeared in the corner of Ron's eyes. Is it Sister Cecilia? Ron even paused for a moment, and then, someone bumped into Ron. He turned his head to look, his body tensed subconsciously. Behind him was a lady who looked to be in her 20s. She should be the daughter of a merchant family. She did not have the unique family crest of the aristocracy, but she was still very beautifully dressed, with loose skirts with lace cannot be afforded by the poor. Wearing a lady's wide-brimmed hat on her head, with long golden hair behind her smooth forehead, she is a quite beautiful woman. The dark eyes were a little dull and tired, but full of hope and expectation. As for the reason for the expectation, maybe it was because of the high protruding belly. This is a pregnant woman. Due to an inadvertent collision, the dark red meat in the pregnant woman's hand fell to the ground. The head that had been lowered finally raised, his eyes stared directly at Ron's pure white priest's robe, and his face began to turn pale. The habits of his previous life still affected Ron. When encountering a pregnant woman, he would often choose to get out of the way. After all, a pregnant woman represents more than just a life. Moreover, pregnant women are very vulnerable. Keeping distance from pregnant women is to protect both yourself and the pregnant woman. Ma'am, how are you feeling? Is there anything uncomfortable? Ron asked quickly. Although, it was the pregnant woman who hit her. But Ron still didn't dare to slack off. If there was any problem, if he sent it to the church in time, he might be able to recover some things. Especially when you see pregnant women looking a little pale. If you feel uncomfortable in any way, please tell me. I am the pastor of the church. Ron said quickly. I believe that the church will give you the best treatment. The lady who had been staring straight at Ron suddenly shivered and seemed to have finally come to her senses. A smile appeared on her pretty face. Sir, you are such a gentleman. But don't worry, I'm not that effeminate and don't need to go to church. This elegant and intellectual pregnant woman nodded politely to Ron, then walked around Ron and walked straight away. Ron was a little bit murmuring in his heart, is everything really okay? Her face was very pale, and there were beads of sweat on her forehead. However, since this lady has already said that there is no problem, Ron can't continue to pester her. When Ron looked up again, Cecilia was nowhere to be seen. After a brief hesitation, Ron placed the bread in front of a little beggar on the roadside, and then chased Cecilia in the direction where she disappeared. Ron had roughly guessed what was going on. In the game, Cecilia entrusted the player to transfer her money to her boyfriend Malta. In the real world, there are no players, so Cecilia can only run errands in person. Once Cecilia realizes her boyfriend's true identity, the bloody nun, she is afraid that she will appear. Ron and Cecilia didn't get along very much. But, it could still be considered a wonderful night. The night he slept on Cecilia's lap was the most comfortable sleep Ron had ever had. What's more, it was also from Cecilia's mouth that Ron learned about the existence of Archibald and Partridge, and for the first time he understood the horror of the world line closing. Ron remembered Cecilia's help to him, and he couldn't bear to see the worst ending. As for Dolores' invitation, Her Royal Highness the Princess should not be impatient. Cecilia changed out of her nun's uniform. At this moment, she was just wearing an ordinary coarse cloth dress. But he has a pretty good foundation, and even without dressing up, he exudes a charming aura. As he walks along, he attracts the attention of countless people. There was a slight smile on her fair and beautiful cheeks. In her pocket were 10 gold coins. That was given to me by Mr. Ron, a very gentle gentleman indeed. The upper class, after thousands of years of decay, has long been filthy. Cecilia even doubts that those humanoid creatures can really be regarded as human beings. A true gentleman like Mr. Ron is so rare. As a serving nun, it was her job to make the guests feel happy, but Mr. Ron did not hurt her, which was undoubtedly her luck. After noticing that Ron was a very gentle gentleman, Cecilia had an idea in her mind. She wanted to make a deal with Ron, or take advantage of this gentle man. She will use all the skills she has learned to give Ron the most wonderful enjoyment. She hoped that Ron would be obsessed with her body and keep her by his side. She would be willing to be the most well-behaved pet around Ron. She only hoped that after Ron got tired of her, he could give her freedom and let her return to her lover. Ridiculous. For the serving nun, this is the best ending. If Ron didn't keep her by his side, she would soon be given to the next guest, and the next guest, and the next guest. Not everyone would be as gentle as Ron. She had no choice. However, what Cecilia didn't expect was that although Mr. Ron did not keep her by his side, he also warned Archbishop Virgil. She no longer needed to attend to other guests. Cecilia felt intensely ashamed of the thought of taking advantage of Mr. Ron. During the 10 days when Mr. Ron was in coma, although she did not always guard Mr. Ron like Miss Serafina and Miss Aurelia, she also kept praying in front of the statue of the goddess. Finally, Mr. Ron woke up. Cecilia was very happy. She could feel that the joy in her heart was definitely no less than that of Serafina and Miss Aurelia. That is, after Mr. Ron woke up, Cecilia finally had some free time, and then she hurriedly left the church. The thought of meeting her boyfriend soon made the smile on Cecilia's face grow stronger, and she was even humming a brisk song on her lips. Unknowingly, she came to the civilian area. She skillfully shuttled between these low houses, and it didn't take long before she arrived at the place in her memory. However, looking at the brick house in front of her, Cecilia was a little confused. She looked around and confirmed that this was her boyfriend's home. But why is it a brick house? It was obviously a wooden house before. It is not easy for ordinary people to own a brick house, and only the rich farmers among the ordinary people can build such a house. The Malta family is not very rich. Suddenly, Cecilia thought of something. A blush quickly appeared on her face, her eyes were silky, and her eyebrows were full of happiness. Could it be that Malta was ready to marry him, so he renovated the house? The brick house you see in front of you is actually the wedding room of your future self and Malta. This is such a waste. This costs a lot of money. Cecilia complained slightly, but sweet happiness flowed in her heart. Just then, a young man in his 20s was walking out of the house. He was in such a hurry that he didn't notice Cecilia at the door. Mart, Cecilia called. The young man named Malta was stunned for a moment, turned around subconsciously, and when he saw Cecilia, a smile appeared on his face. "Ah, Cecilia, I dreamed of you last night, I miss you so much." Quote. Cecilia bit her lower lip lightly with her teeth, a happy smile on her face. "Mart, I miss you too." She doesn't know too many cheesy love words, but the sentence, "I miss you too," is just a way to vent the hottest feelings in her heart. She really wanted to throw herself into her lover's arms and listen to her lover's heartbeat. But as a nun, no matter what her job is within the church, she must not do anything that damages the face of the church outside. Cecilia took a deep breath and suppressed the impulse in her heart. "Mart, why did you build a new house? Is this our future wedding room?" Malta's face stiffened slightly, but he was very good at adjusting his facial expression. The slight stiffness quickly dissipated. Malta even opened his hands. "Of course, Cecilia, do you like it?" Cecilia nodded her head vigorously. "I like it very much, thank you, Malta, but does it cost a lot of money?" Malta said affectionately. "Oh, Cecilia, please don't say that. You are the most precious gem in my heart. For you, I am willing to do my best. I can't entertain countless guests in a luxurious villa like those great nobles. I don't have the power to let you receive the blessing of a priest in a sacred church. But I will do my best to give you a home that can protect you from wind and rain. Although I spent a lot of money, I can make more money, but the wedding between us is only once, and I don't want you to have any regrets." Malta gently patted Cecilia's head and said softly, Cecilia's eyes were filled with mist, and her heart was filled with gentle happiness. Malta is not strong, not handsome either, not rich either. But for Cecilia, he is the best man in the world. As long as he loves her, Cecilia will not ask for anything more. But soon, Malta's brows frowned. He raised his head and glanced at the sky. Ah, Cecilia, I'm really sorry. I really want to spend more time with you, but I have to go to work. In order to I owe a lot of money for building this house. Money. Cecilia's body trembled, and then she remembered her original purpose of leaving the church this time. His little hands hurriedly groped in his pocket and took out a small money bag. Inside were the 10 gold coins given to her by Mr. Ron, as well as the silver coins and copper plates she had saved in her daily life. She handed the purse to Malta and whispered, "By the way, Malta, I have to tell you something. I have been arranged by the church to entertain a distinguished guest." Malta frowned and his expression turned gloomy for a moment, but his fingers did not stop opening the money bag. In order to avoid Malta from misunderstanding, Cecilia spoke faster, "But don't worry, that guest didn't do anything to me." At the same time, Mart had already opened the money bag, and a dazzling golden light flashed in front of Mart. In an instant, the haze on Mart's face disappeared, replaced by an excited twist. "Oh, God, this is it, a gold coin." He didn't even hear Cecilia's words behind him. Malta's voice was trembling. 10. You can get 10 gold coins by sleeping with a distinguished guest. As expected of you, Cecilia, you did a great job. What? For a moment, Cecilia's face was dull. She looked at her boyfriend who was twisted and howling like a monster in front of her in disbelief, and her eyes lost their highlights. It's like a bad look. At that moment, Cecilia's eyes lost their light, leaving only dullness and darkness. She couldn't describe how she felt now. Seeing her boyfriend's excited and distorted expression, and his violent breathing like a beast, the original warmth and sweetness in his heart was extinguished instantly as if a basin of ice water had been poured on it. Malta's originally familiar face seemed so unfamiliar to Cecilia at this moment. It was as if he had been replaced by another person at that moment. As a serving nun, she couldn't change her fate, but she didn't want to hide her lover, so she chose to tell the truth. What's more, Mr. Ron didn't do anything to her. She had thought about how her boyfriend might react. He may be very angry and furious, cursing those in authority for their shamelessness. He may also be very sad, but in the end he will pat his head gently to comfort himself and not to feel too uncomfortable. He might even vent his anger on her and beat her severely. After all, no man wants to see the woman he loves becoming another man's toy. But Cecilia never expected that her boyfriend would react like this. It seemed that, in his eyes, his own chastity was far less attractive than 10 gold coins. In an instant, Cecilia felt as if a piece of her heart had been dug out, leaving it empty and painful. Her brain was like a mess, and she didn't even know how she should react. I don't know how much time passed, but Malta finally recovered a little from the excitement of 10 gold coins. His face was still red, he was breathing heavily from his nostrils, and he was holding one tightly with his fingers. A gold coin shimmering with dazzling light, his eyes moved away with difficulty, and finally fell on Cecilia. By the way, Cecilia, what did you just say? Are you arranged by the church to serve distinguished guests? Malta said easily. Oh, please, Cecilia, when you secretly told me about the serving nun before, didn't we already know that such a day would come? Why should we care? 10 gold coins. That gentleman is really a generous gentleman. Didn't he name you again later? It seems that Malta is more interested in the man who took away his girlfriend's virginity than the fact that his girlfriend lost her virginity. After all, he was a rich and generous man who only paid 10 gold coins. These 10 gold coins are enough for a commoner to live a normal life for 10 years. Aha! Cecilia's face instantly turned pale. She bit her lip hard and her body was shaking slightly. She tilted her head and looked at Malta with an incredible look. Do you want me to accompany him again? Of course. Malta nodded subconsciously, but the man who gradually recovered from the madness caused by the gold coins quickly noticed something unusual about Cecilia. This is a very smart man. He judged Cecilia's thoughts in the shortest time. A gentle smile soon appeared on his face. He gently stroked Cecilia's long hair, Of course I don't want to. Cecilia, you are my most precious gem, how can I bear to watch you being defiled by other men? Dear Cecilia, can't you feel it? I am caring about you. What happened has happened, and you know very well that we don't have the ability to change it. If you can't make that gentleman obsessed with your body, you will soon be assigned to other guests. It is better to have your body used by one man than to be used by many men, isn't it? Malta's voice became softer and gentler. Cecilia, you must not think that I am doing it for money. You know, I am not interested in money. Otherwise, it would not have cost a huge amount of money to rebuild the original wooden house into a brick house. I am really thinking about you. Think carefully about what I said. Is this the best thing for you? Besides, you've already done it once with this gentleman, so what's the difference between doing it once and doing it 100 times? Of course, this gentleman, it would be best if he could still be as generous as the first time. Seeing that Cecilia just lowered her head and said nothing, Malta narrowed his eyes and spoke again. Cecilia, I know these words may make you disappointed and angry. But, please believe me, I am simply considering you from your perspective, without any selfish motives. You can doubt everything, but you must not doubt my feelings for you. What I like is your person, not your body. I don't care about that thin film. I just hope you can live a happy life. Look, I have even prepared our wedding room. I am just waiting for the day when you leave the church. Then I will marry you, and we can live happily together. Cecilia didn't know when she left. Her mind was very confused. All kinds of pictures keep popping up in my mind. She thought about how her parents died in a plague when she was very young. She had not yet been adopted by the church, so she could only wander around the streets and alleys with unkempt hair every day, fighting for food with rats and wild dogs in garbage dumps. The world of children is very cruel. A child like her without parental protection will inevitably become the target of bullying by other children. They threw stones at her, snatched away the rotten bones that she had finally dug out from the garbage, threw them on the ground and stamped on them with their feet, and tore her few clothes into tatters. The icy cold water poured over her body and she laughed heartily. Cecilia could not forget that when everyone was bullying her, only Malta stood up. From that moment on, Malta's figure was forever imprinted in Cecilia's heart and could never be forgotten. Maybe he is not strong, but he is her hero. But today, when she saw her boyfriend again, Cecilia felt extremely strange. No matter how hard she tried, she could not overlap the image of her boyfriend with the image in her memory. Her boyfriend's voice still echoed in her mind. Maybe she should trust her boyfriend. After all, the wedding room is ready. However, Cecilia didn't know what was going on, she just felt an unbearable nausea suddenly surged into her heart. She couldn't bear it anymore, so she staggered to the roadside, holding on to the rusty railing with one hand, and with a sound from her mouth, a large piece of filth was spitted into the grass. The intestines seemed to be twisted together, constantly releasing pain that made Cecilia's soul tremble. Her eyes were filled with tears, and tears rolled down her smooth cheeks. At this moment, a hand suddenly patted her back gently. Okay, it's okay. A very gentle voice floated in Cecilia's ears. Cecilia raised her head in a panic, and a familiar face appeared in front of her. Mr. Ron, why are you here? As soon as she said the words, Cecilia thought that she had just vomited and now her body must smell very disgusting. She subconsciously stepped back and distanced herself from Ron, not wanting her bad smell to spread to Mr. Ron. Ron just smiled. Although he came a little late, looking at Cecilia's appearance, he could basically guess what happened here. The hope that Cecilia had been holding on to had cracks in her heart, but it had not yet completely collapsed. Ron didn't answer, just handed Cecilia a pure white handkerchief. Cecilia took it silently and wiped away the stains on her mouth and chest. I wanted to return the handkerchief to Ron, but in the end I put it in my pocket. Sir, I will return the handkerchief to you after I wash it. Ron didn't mind a small handkerchief. He tilted his head and stared at Cecilia. Is it difficult? Cecilia bit her lip and nodded silently. Let's go. Where to? I'll show you something more uncomfortable. Ron said extremely cruel words with a smile on his face. The seeds of doubt have been planted in Cecilia's heart. Sooner or later, Cecilia will discover the truth. In this case, let him completely destroy the hope in Cecilia's heart. No matter what Cecilia will become in the end, at least she no longer has to endure the long suffering. Ron turned around and walked away. Cecilia's eyes were frightened. She hesitated, but finally followed Ron. Soon, Cecilia discovered that the direction her husband was heading was exactly where her boyfriend's house was. Unspeakable fear, like the sharp claws of a beast, grabbed Cecilia's heart and made her whole body tremble. Finally, the brand new brick house reappeared in front of Cecilia. Cecilia looked at Mr. Ron with some doubts, wondering what he wanted to show her, but he didn't say much. He didn't seem to care about the etiquette of the superiors, the identity of the priests, and he didn't care at all. Regardless of whether the pure white and holy priest's robe would be stained, he just walked to the corner of the street and sat under a big tree. He leaned against the tree trunk and stared at the scorching sun above his head. Then, Ron waved at Cecilia and motioned for Cecilia to sit over. There was a slight struggle on Cecilia's face, but in the end she sat obediently next to Ron, with her back leaning against the same big tree, her black hair scattered on the ground, and her slender white hands wrapped around her knees. The originally tall body was huddled up at this moment, looking a little pitiful. The same dark eyes stared at the ground, as if carefully observing the ants moving, but those eyes had no focus after all. Later, no matter what you see or hear, remember, I have everything. Cecilia's body trembled slightly, and after a while, a weak response floated to Ron's ears. Ron did not comfort Cecilia. When she was about to face the cruel truth, any comfort was so pale. Finally, when the sun floated above their heads, a burst of chaotic footsteps, mixed with a man's voice, entered their ears. Cecilia shuddered and raised her head suddenly. The familiar voice told Cecilia that Malta was back. Her eyes flicked over, and the next moment, her originally rosy cheeks suddenly became as pale as paper, without any blood. Right next to Malta, there was another girl following him. It was a petite girl who looked very cute, like a butterfly flying among the flowers. A soft smile appeared on Mart's face. He led the girl to the door of his house, pointed at the brand new brick house, and proudly announced, "Look, Ava, this is the wedding I have prepared for you. House." Boom, click. Ron seemed to feel that Cecilia beside him was struck by lightning. When he looked over, he only saw Cecilia's eyes, which had turned scarlet at some point. "Brother Malta, I heard that you have a very good relationship with a nun." The two people opposite did not know the existence of Ron and Cecilia, and the voices of their voices continued to float. "Ah, you said Cecilia. Ava, you have to believe me, I have nothing to do with Cecilia. I have never liked her. It was purely because she was bullied when she was a child, and I helped her stand up. It was just once. Actually, I wasn't standing up for her, it was just because her parents gave a sum of money to my parents before they died, asking my parents to help take care of her. Who would have known that this woman would get involved me?" Cecilia was trembling all over. Before his death, his parents gave a sum of money to the Malta family. Why did she never know? "Take care of. Don't worry, I will definitely cut ties with her and won't let that woman affect our married life. What's more, that woman has been screwed by the higher-ups in the church a long time ago. She just wants to find me to take over. How could I fall in love with that kind of woman?" Malta said with a smile. "He only fell in love with Sicily. It's just Ya's money. After all, it feels really great to earn a lot of money every month without doing anything but saying a few nice words of love. As for Cecilia, will she cause trouble for him after she leaves the church? God, Cecilia has already left the church, so what is there to worry about? Pain, 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 heartbreaking pain." When her husband brought her here, Cecilia had vaguely guessed something about Mart's previous performance. But when the bloody truth was unfolding in front of her, Cecilia still felt so painful that she couldn't breathe. "Sir, he is really a gentle and cruel person." "Ah. Who is it? Who is speaking in the ear? Can't hear clearly." Cecilia's beautiful face showed a silly smile, slightly twisted, and her black eyes were wide open. "Hee. Malta, have you been lying to me?" He lied to her for 10 years. 10 years. 10 years of sweet talk or nothing but poison wrapped in a shell of happiness. Cecilia stood up from the ground silently and walked towards her boyfriend opposite step by step. The real Yandere looks far scarier than the one in the game. Her hands dropped naturally, and on the long tip of the middle finger of her right hand, a scarlet blood drop slowly emerged, as if there was some mysterious force adhering to it. The blood drop did not fall to the ground, but hung in the air and swayed gently. There are more and more blood beads, and they gather together to form a ball. It squirmed, and then turned into a scarlet knife. Seeing Cecilia's appearance, Ron had a headache. He had been vaccinated in advance and tried not to let Cecilia bear all the stimulation at once, but the speed of Cecilia's darkening still shocked Ron. In the game, after knowing the truth, Cecilia suffered a mental breakdown and was corrupted by the evil god. In the real world, even Ron was affected. Crazy and incomprehensible murmurs and roars began to echo in his ears. The weird sounds were extremely penetrating, even though Ron had been blocked for the first time. He lost his hearing, but the sound still echoed in Ron's mind. Resisting the impact of the babble, he looked at Cecilia beside him. Her beautiful face was extremely distorted, beads of sweat were pouring out of her forehead, and her blood vessels were bulging. Her body was sometimes tense and sometimes twitching, and the expression on her face was sometimes angry, sometimes sad, sometimes smiling contemptuously. Only the right arm holding the blood knife tightly remained extremely calm and motionless from beginning to end. In the depths of her pupils, there seemed to be countless lights and shadows overlapping, hazily weaving into a strange pattern, like a scarlet X, like some kind of weird emblem. Her body was also looming with a layer of scarlet light. The plot in the game is unfolding in front of Ron. Although some kind of mysterious sound was also heard, Cecilia was obviously more seriously polluted than Ron, and a scarlet luster was spreading on her originally long black hair. Her slender and hot body moved forward step by step, with a strange smile on her face. She gently opened her bright red lips and sang a beautiful children's song. But that clear voice, coupled with Cecilia's current appearance, only made Ron's hair stand on end. Taking a deep breath, Ron regained his will. He stepped forward and grabbed Cecilia's shoulder with his right hand. He made no attempt to awaken Cecilia with words. He knew very well that any language was pale and powerless when it was contaminated and eroded. There is only one way to save Cecilia, the soul-crossing boat. Although there are still many secrets on the soul-crossing boat, there is no doubt that it is Ron's territory. The soul-crossing boat has a mysterious power that even gods cannot easily get involved in. Once you enter the soul-crossing boat, you can isolate the evil god from corroding Cecilia. But just when Ron's right hand landed on Cecilia's shoulder, a strange scene happened. The scarlet light that had almost enveloped Cecilia's body subsided like a tide, as if it sensed something. Even the whispers in my ears no longer exist. Ron was slightly startled by this abnormality. It was the evil god's pollution. When did the evil god become so easy to talk to? Subconsciously, Ron raised his head and looked at the sky above his head. I don't know if it was an illusion, but he seemed to see a huge bronze throne stained with scarlet blood. This weird feeling only lasted for a short moment, maybe not even a second, before Ron's consciousness returned to normal. It seemed like the evil god who was polluting Cecilia gave him a face and retreated on his own initiative. But he is just Ron, a scholar of ancient writing, a half-baked pastor, and a false prophet. Does he have such a great reputation? Ron scratched his hair, not knowing why. On the other hand, Cecilia beside her, after the evil god's erosion subsided, her body shivered violently, and her pretty face turned pale in an instant. She didn't know what happened just now. She seemed to have entered a very strange state, with an indescribable sound echoing in her ears. Driven by this sound, there was only darkness and gloom as thick as plasma in her heart. She just wanted to listen to the sound of blood spurting and bones breaking, as if it was the most beautiful music in the world. But now, the weird feeling subsided, leaving only the fear that made her whole body shiver. With her eyes widened, Cecilia looked up at Ron, with an expression on her face that looked like she was about to cry. "Sir, Ron exhaled slowly and threw away the messy thoughts that had just appeared in his heart. He smiled at Cecilia and patted her head gently. "I have everything." With the same voice, Cecilia couldn't bear it anymore. Her boyfriend's betrayal, the disillusionment of years of expectations and hopes, the fear of losing control while immersed in blood, everything broke out at this time. Her thin shoulders, she was shaking like a little girl, crying for a moment. Ron smiled and gently stroked Cecilia's long, silky hair, trying to bring some comfort to Cecilia. It's okay, it's okay." He wasn't very comforting. It always felt like he was not comforting a girl, but an abandoned kitten. By the way, I'm going to cry, can you stop shaking your hands? From the corner of Ron's eyes, he could even see the scarlet bloody knife held tightly in Cecilia's palm. By the way, didn't the evil god give him a favor and disappear on his own initiative? Why is this bloody knife still there? Is it possible to say that Cecilia now has the same power as in the game, but she is not as crazy as in the game? Hey, don't move around. Really, someone could die if you're not careful. Ron's eyes slowly moved away from the girl in his arms and fell on Malta opposite. This man didn't hear the movement on the corner, and maybe even if he heard it, he didn't care much. He just happily hugged his engaged fiancée, introduced how perfect his new house was, and promised his fiancée that there would be a grand wedding in a few days. Ron's eyes were a little cold. It is worthy of being the 17th ranked NPC in the game that players want to kill the most. This guy is disgusting just standing there. Malta and Ava had already entered the house, and the man wanted to take his fiancée to see the decoration inside. Cecilia in her arms seemed to have vented a lot of the emotions accumulated in her chest. Although her shoulders were still shaking, and her nose could be heard sniffling from time to time, at least she no longer cried like a little girl. She took a deep breath and reluctantly left Ron's arms. The gentleman was very gentle, but this gentleness was not an excuse for her wanton behavior. Seeing the wet spot on the priest's robe, Cecilia's cheeks turned red. Sorry, sir, your clothes. Well, before Cecilia could finish her words, she was interrupted by Ron. If Mart died in front of you now, would you still be sad? Cecilia was stunned for a moment, then shook her head. I'm not that lowly enough to feel sad for someone who has been squeezing money from me and cheating on my feelings. How strong the love was in the past, how deep the hatred is now. This answer was crisp and clear, worthy of the bloody nun. It is indeed an existence that can be watched by evil gods. Then do you still want to kill him with your own hands now? Ron raised his eyebrows and asked again. Cecilia's breathing stagnated slightly, and there was finally a slight hesitation on her face. Before she was awakened by Ron, she seemed to be immersed in scarlet plasma, and there was only one thought left in her chest, and that was, kill. Kill all the hateful things that stand in front of you, leaving no one behind. Even after being awakened by her husband, she still hated that man, and this would never change. 10 years of deception. 10 years of false happiness. The destruction of 10 years of expectations. A girl, the betrayal of the purest love for 10 years. It is impossible for people who have not experienced it to understand what kind of suffering Cecilia is going through in her heart. But Cecilia also had some resistance to killing Mart. Maybe it's the influence of the church over the past 10 years, or maybe it's just because he doesn't want to get his hands dirty. The most important thing is that Cecilia knows very well that she is just a serving nun. She does not have a high status or strong strength. If she really kills Malta, will it bring trouble to her husband? Seeing Cecilia's complicated expression, Ron understood what she was thinking. However, the resentment accumulated in the heart always needs to be vented. There is no reason for only a girl, Cecilia, to bear this suffering. Ron moved his arms and said, let's go. What to do? Kill. Ron's tone was light, as if it wasn't a problem at all, it was as casual as going to dinner. Thinking of some random things in his mind, Ron took out the ironwood staff. Ron likes this weapon more and more, but unfortunately only the purple one is excellent. If it can be legendary in gold, Ron will probably be able to use it for a lifetime. The more than 80-kilogram staff spun twice briskly in Ron's palm, and then Ron threw it casually, and the ironwood staff flew towards the new house in front of him. Boom! The more than 80-kilogram iron and wood staff, coupled with Ron's strength, even if he didn't use all his strength, the impact was definitely not something that an ordinary brick wall could withstand. The wall collapsed instantly, sending smoke and dust everywhere. Ron also took steps and walked forward. Seeing her husband's actions, Cecilia froze on the spot, her eyes were moist, and she knew what her husband was going to do. The husband is standing up for her and supporting her. She is just a humble serving nun. The status of serving nuns in the church is extremely low. Although they are nominally priests, in the eyes of other nuns and priests, the existence of serving nuns is like a mass of filth, tarnishing the purity of the church. Behind the scenes abuse, overt rejection, and even bullying are common. Who cares about the feelings of a serving nun? Who will do justice to the serving nuns? No, never. Gerald was a good man, but as an archbishop, he had too many things to deal with, and it was impossible for him to focus on serving the nuns. In the past 10 years in the Church of the Goddess of Dawn, Cecilia has become accustomed to a life of being bullied and resigned. Looking at her husband's back with blurred eyes, Cecilia bit her lip hard. For the first time in 10 years, she felt the warmth of being cared for. She felt like she was being taken seriously. It turned out that someone really cared about her. She originally wanted to stop her husband, not wanting him to get into unnecessary trouble because of her own reasons. But Cecilia finally endured it. She remembered what her husband said, "I have everything." Putting her little hand on her chest, Cecilia felt the throbbing in her chest and silently followed her husband. From a long distance, Ron could hear the sound of chickens and dogs jumping in the room. "Oh God, what on earth is going on? I just built a house." Following the hole made by the ironwood staff, Ron got into Malta's new house. The flying dust had slowly fallen. After looking around, Ron had to admit that Malta was a man who knew how to enjoy things, people. This brick house is very luxurious inside, at least, for this world. The surrounding walls are painted white. The ground beneath your feet was even paved with stone slabs. There is a soft sofa in the living room. On the marble coffee table, there is a set of silver water glasses and cutlery. There is even a magic chandelier hanging from the roof that emits soft white light for a long time. Yes, it's not a kerosene lamp, it's a magic lamp. These are definitely not things that ordinary people are willing to enjoy. Their lives are really luxurious. His gaze swept across the room. The 4 people, including the petite girl named Ava, subconsciously hid in the corner out of fear. The 2 elderly people, who must be Malta's parents, looked at the wall that was smashed through and the marble coffee table that was smashed into pieces by a black stick, with distressed expressions on their faces. As for Malta, he was furious in the middle of the hall, jumping up and down like a monkey. At this moment, Malta finally noticed Ron's existence. The anger of his new house being destroyed made Malta almost completely lose his mind. He rushed towards Ron like a madman. He didn't even notice Ron's priest robes at all. The dirty claws grabbed directly at Ron's neck. "You ruined my house." However, Ron was faster, and he grabbed one of Malta's fingers. "Break it off gently." Crunch. Malta's index finger was directly placed on the back of his hand. "Ah, fingers and hearts. It hurts, it hurts." Malta desperately held his right hand in his arms. His body was like a miserable worm, falling to the ground, squirming, twitching, and rolling. The screams were more violent than ever before, and the unbearable pain made Mart's face covered with beads of sweat. The sharp and hoarse voice almost lifted the roof off. Looking at Malta's fingers on the back of his hand, the remaining 3 people in the room were also horrified. It was obvious that Malta was the unlucky one, but vaguely, they seemed to have their own fingers, and they were constantly feeling pain. The illusion. After a few seconds, Malta's parents reacted. The middle-aged woman threw herself at her son on the ground like crazy. Seeing Cecilia coming out from behind Ron, the woman seemed to understand something. She screamed like crazy. "Cecilia, as expected, you're a fool. I knew that my son would be in trouble if he got involved with you." Cecilia bit her lip. Although she had already expected it, Malta's mother was completely different from before. She did not have the gentle and enthusiastic attitude before, which still made Cecilia feel strange. Ron rubbed his forehead helplessly and looked at the woman on the ground. "Your son has lied to Cecilia for 10 years. How much money have you defrauded from Cecilia in the past 10 years? The middle-aged woman scratched her neck. "So what? This woman is stupid. Didn't you just cheat her for 10 years with just a little money? You actually broke off my son's finger. He's just a child." Hiss. Ron gasped and leaned back subconsciously. Looking at the middle-aged woman in front of him, he felt awestruck. Whether it's the Earth or this world, there are such people everywhere. It's a pity that this is not the Earth. The middle-aged man pointed at Ron with a trembling finger, his lips trembling. You, who are you? You actually hurt my son for no reason. I'm going to report it to the official. I want to sue you." Ron couldn't help but laugh. "City Lord's mansion, Serafina is my woman. Church of the Goddess of Dawn, Bishop Virgil is my brother. Sue me. Just go ahead. What is bullying others by force? This is bullying others by force. The original Ron also hated this kind of behavior. After all, Malta and his parents were just ordinary people. But now, seeing the dull expressions of Malta's parents, Ron only felt a sense of joy. This family made Ron feel more disgusted than Herman or Snaufilip. Ron's face did not change. In Larnaca, you can sue him however you want, whether it is to the city lord's mansion, which symbolizes the government, or to the church of the goddess of dawn. If you frown, he will lose. So what if we report it to the headquarters of the Dawn Goddess Church? Isn't there a great saint named Christian standing there? Originally, Ron thought that this was just Malta's own behavior and had nothing to do with his parents. But now looking at the behavior of these two old guys, Ron understood that his parents must also be participants, and maybe they were. These two shameless old guys have been making suggestions. They want to keep deceiving Cecilia until Cecilia leaves the church and can no longer squeeze out any profit. What a shameless family. Malta's parents finally saw clearly that Ron was wearing a priest's robe, and the expression on his face suddenly became stiff. The priest, the real priest, unlike Cecilia, was an existence they could never offend. Ron didn't show any mercy because Malta's mother was a woman. He raised one foot and kicked the noisy woman out, and squatted down in front of Malta. Seeing Ron's figure, Mart's hair stood on end, and he was so frightened that he didn't even dare to continue screaming. He could only clench his teeth and tremble. In comparison, Ron seemed very easygoing. He gently held one of Malta's fingers. Where is the money Cecilia gave you? Ron didn't care about 10 gold coins, but if these money fell into Mart's hands, Ron would feel sick. Money? What money? That was given to me by Cecilia herself. Ah! Before he could finish his sentence, there was another earth-shattering scream. A pig that is about to be slaughtered is nothing more than that. The second finger was moved to the back of the hand by Ron. The position of the finger joints is almost ready to explode. The intense pain caused his whole body to twitch continuously. The movement here also attracted the attention of many civilians around. Every pair of eyes looked at this place with horror. No one expected that Ron would do this. Ruthless, without any hesitation at all. He is obviously a priest. Looking at the two twisted fingers, almost everyone felt a dull pain in their fingers. Ron was too lazy to talk to Malta. He reached out and groped around on Malta, and soon found a money bag. With a shake of his hand, several yellow copper plates fell to the ground with a clanking sound. Just a few copper coins. Although Cecilia's monthly salary is not much, she still has a few silver coins, all of which are given to Malta. In 10 years, at least dozens of gold coins. It was a civilian family with wealth that could never be used up in a lifetime. Not to mention these, there are still the 10 gold coins that Ron gave to Cecilia just before. So much money, but only a few copper coins left. Where's the money? Ron asked again in a gloomy voice. Waves of tingling pain continued along his fingers, arms, and into his brain. There were scarlet bloodstains between his clenched teeth. People who have never experienced it have no way of knowing what it would feel like to have their fingers cut off. It is even more unbearable than having your fingers chopped off. But facing the ferocious Ron, Malta could only endure it with all his strength, and replied in a hissing voice, "The money is there, give me another chance, I will definitely make a comeback, I will definitely win next time, and I will pay everything back then, for you guys." Ron laughed contemptuously. He was still a bad gambler. Fortunately, Cecilia was not really with Malta. Even without the existence of the woman Ava, Cecilia would never be happy with Malta. Looking at Malta's parents, they were obviously not surprised by Malta's answer. They had known their son's character for a long time. If Cecilia hadn't sent money every quarter, they would have been unable to survive, right? This family is all parasites lying on Cecilia's body sucking blood. Last question, what are you going to do to Cecilia after she leaves the church? Ron raised his eyebrows. This is not a necessary question, but Ron doesn't want Cecilia to still have any attachment to this man. Cecilia had been standing quietly by the side, watching Ron torture Malta, without any sympathy in her heart, but when she heard this question, her eyes couldn't help but shrink slightly. Of course I will marry her, I will definitely marry her. Malta replied subconsciously. Ron exhaled slightly. Why can't this guy learn well after such a long time? Click. Malta screamed heartbreakingly, and the sound made everyone's scalp numb. I don't like hearing lies. I said. Malta screamed loudly. Yes, there is a noble who is interested in Cecilia. If Cecilia really breaks away from the church one day, I plan to sell her to that noble. Quote. As soon as these words came out, Cecilia's pupils suddenly shrank. A pair of plain hands subconsciously hugged his shoulders, and his slender body began to tremble. Cecilia simply couldn't imagine how she would have ended up if it hadn't been for her husband. The lover I thought I was far more cruel than I imagined. Ron's eyes also narrowed. This family was really prepared to eat up Cecilia and wipe her clean. Not even a bit of dregs would be left. Although there are many shameless people in this world, those who can be so shameless are definitely the best in the world. Is this guy really a human being? Ron's right hand finally moved away from Malta's wrist. There was almost no intact finger in this guy's palm. Malta thought he finally no longer had to endure that kind of torture, so he let out a heavy breath. However, Ron's right hand suddenly drew an arc in midair and clasped Malta's head. The next second, under Malta's extremely surprised gaze, Ron's entire head was lifted up from the ground. Malta seemed to have figured out what Ron wanted to do, and his bloodshot eyes widened. No, don't. Boom. The head that was raised high was hit hard on the ground by Ron. There was only a dull sound, and the stone slabs on the ground shattered, along with Malta's head, and red and white sticky stuff sprayed everywhere. There was deathly silence all around, except for Malta's dead body, which was still twitching like a toad. This guy doesn't care about the laws of the Kingdom of Granville at all. Cecilia's heart also trembled slightly, but in the next moment, she felt that some kind of heavy burden that had been pressing on her body seemed to have disappeared at this moment, and was replaced by unprecedented ease. When Malta said that he was going to sell her to a noble, the last thoughts in Cecilia's heart were completely cut off. Malta's parents' expressions changed even more. They didn't even have time to grieve over their son's death. Just like pure instinct, the two of them screamed almost at the same time and ran out of the house. They want to run, they just want to be farther away from this demon, farther away. A sharp blade, with a scarlet light, silently passed through the throats of the two people. Their bodies immediately stayed in place, and the next second, they fell to the ground with a thud. The throat was obviously cut open, but no blood spurted out. All the blood was swallowed up by the bloody knife. Cecilia finally put away the bloody knife, dragged the two corpses back to the room, and threw them next to Malta. This was her first time killing someone. She had no fear, but instead felt a sense of excitement in her heart that she was eager to try. Destroy the whole family. A family must be neat and tidy. Ron finally stood up and stretched his arms vigorously, as if he had just done a trivial thing. It seems that the repairman doesn't like all trash. At least, Malta's family was not attracted by the repairman. They are not even qualified to be pawns. Without the intervention of the repairman, it is so easy to kill a few people. This was Cecilia's matter. It had nothing to do with Ron originally, but after killing these three people, Ron felt particularly happy in his heart, as if some of the depression accumulated in his heart was swept away at this moment. Could it be that killing someone is a good way to vent their depression? This discovery is indeed a bit not good. Shaking away the blood beads on his hand, Ron walked towards the door on his own. Cecilia immediately followed behind. Ron didn't do anything to Ava. In some ways, this woman was just after being deceived. She did not do anything to harm Aurelia, and Ron did not kill innocent people to that extent. The crowd gathered at the door dispersed immediately. No one had any dissatisfaction with Ron for killing the three members of Malta's family, and they were even a little happy. It was obvious that this family of three, even in the civilian area, were not very good people. No one even went to notify the city guard. Do you feel better? Ron tilted his head and glanced at Cecilia. The idiot nun who had been deceived for 10 years exhaled heavily. Much better. That's good. By the way, you go to the city lord's mansion and report the situation here. Believe me, nothing will happen. After all, after killing 3 people, it would be a bit inappropriate not to inform the city lord's mansion. Suitable. Ron still had to go to meet Dolores, which had already delayed a lot of time. Cecilia nodded. Ron took out a few more gold coins from his pocket and handed them to Cecilia. Sir, what do you mean? Cecilia bit her lip lightly and asked in a low voice. Nothing, I just want you to run an errand for me and help me buy some herbs from the medicine store. Ron carefully explained the type and quantity of herbs to be purchased. That is the magic potion used to break through the panic level. Only then did Cecilia's face burst into a smile. She took the gold coins and left. Seeing Cecilia's leaving figure, Ron chuckled slightly. He knew that although Cecilia looked normal now, she must be very confused inside. The best way to stop Cecilia from thinking wildly is to find something for Cecilia to do. Even if it's just a little thing, it can make Cecilia feel needed. And this is what Cecilia lacks most at the moment. The smile on his face gradually faded away. After a brief plan in his mind, Ron walked straight towards the Sykes Hotel. In the letter sent by Princess Dolores, the agreed meeting place was at the Sykes Hotel. Although, from Ron's perspective, this might seem inappropriate. After all, that was the Sykes Hotel, right? The famous gun house in Larnaca City. It was only the first time that he and the eldest Princess Dolores met, so they booked a room directly in the hotel. Is it too fast? Ron, he is not such a casual person, he is a gentleman. In fact, if Dolores was really that enthusiastic, Ron wouldn't be able to reluctantly agree. After all, as a gentleman, it would be rude to refuse a lady's request casually. Based on Ron's experience in the game, this kind of thing is actually very likely to happen. Along the way, Ron's thoughts wandered, and his mind wandered to all corners of the world. Just as he was passing a drug store, Ron suddenly stopped. The name of the drug store seemed familiar inexplicably. A group of city defense troops guarded the door, strictly prohibiting anyone from entering or exiting. Soon, Ron remembered where he had heard the name of this pharmacy, from Virgil's mouth. Before Herman was parasitized by the eggs of the black beast, he bought several bottles of love potion at this drug store before going to a prostitute. Although Herman was dead, the drug store became the subject of strict surveillance from then on. But, generally speaking, shouldn't surveillance be conducted covertly? Why are the guards standing at the door? Isn't this a little too unprofessional? Maybe, something happened. Ron walked towards the door. He showed the senior priest's certificate to the guard at the door and easily gained the qualification to enter the pharmacy. As a cleric, you have many privileges that ordinary people do not have. Be careful, the situation inside is a bit bad. The city guard kindly reminded. The superiors will arrange someone to deal with it soon. Ron nodded and took a step forward. As soon as he entered the pharmacy, he could immediately feel a strong stench. Like a piece of fat that has rotted for 3 or 4 days in the summer. The whole room was dark and gloomy. Under the illumination of the gas lamp, one can clearly see tiny particles of dust floating in the air. Just as imagined, there was a thin and hunched corpse lying on the floor of the hall, and the strong stench was emanating from this corpse. It looked like he had been dead for a long time. The messy, bird's nest-like dry hair obscures his face, making it impossible to see his appearance at a glance. Walking over slowly, Ron stretched out his hand to push away the hair covering the deceased's face. Although judging from the smell, he should have been dead for several days, there was no sign of jaundice on the body, no where the stench actually comes from. Although the face was wrinkled, there were no signs of decay. At first glance, it looked like it had been dead for less than a day. He should be the owner of this pharmacy. I don't know if it's Ron's illusion, or if this thin and dry old man looks similar. I always feel that he has some similarities with the oldest father Abraham of the Church of the Dawn Goddess. Ron didn't stay here too long and left the pharmacy quickly. Virgil would investigate the matter here. However, when Ron arrived at the Sykes Hotel, his expression suddenly became weird. He rubbed his forehead helplessly. He had forgotten that the Sykes Hotel was not just for booking rooms. You can also dine on the first floor of the Sykes Hotel. It was all Dolores's fault for choosing such a special place that he even misunderstood. It was definitely not because of his dirty thoughts. After gathering his mood, Ron glanced across the hall. He soon discovered the figure of the eldest princess. She seemed to have gone through some special makeup. The long golden hair looks like silk woven with golden threads. The fiery red dress bound her graceful body and highlighted her graceful curves. No matter where she was, Dolores was the most dazzling one. Such a beautiful woman will naturally be favored by a large number of males. But the strange thing is that no one in the huge living room dared to come forward and strike up a conversation, not even the nobles. Dolores seemed to have a special temperament, as if she were covered with barbs and thorns, making people afraid to approach her easily. Once you get too close, you will definitely be covered in bruises. Not every second generation is as stupid as Herman. These second-generation nobles will never easily provoke those they cannot afford to offend. Bah, bah, bah. At this moment, footsteps were heard, and a figure walked towards the direction of Dolores. Several aristocratic young men in the restaurant could see the playfulness in each other's eyes when they looked at each other. There really is someone who dares to flirt with this noble and elegant woman. His courage is commendable. They will never forget that just in the morning, a tall and handsome blonde guy tried to strike up a conversation, and finally got the word, go. He is really an idiot. Judging from his clothes, he must be a priest. It is simply a dream for a clergyman with a not too high status to get involved with a woman of this level. Among them, there is Lucius, the legitimate son of Earl Sharp, and Carlyle, the son of Viscount Lynch. Who is not more noble, more gentleman, and more handsome than him? They stared here expectantly, eager to see this man make a fool of himself. While he was talking, the priest had already walked up to Dolores. Dolores, who had been staring out the window, finally felt the movement here. She glanced at Ron with the same golden eyes, seeming to ask, "Who are you?" "Your Highness Dolores." Dolores raised her eyebrows, and she proactively extended her right hand to Ron. "Prophet, His Excellency Ron Copperfield." Met, including Lucius and Carlyle, several second-generation nobles, all had their eyes fixed on this side, and they could not hear what the two of them said. However, seeing that the beautiful lady had raised her right hand, her heart was filled with excitement. Tisk, it seems that this prickly beauty was angered by the two harassments, right? Is this going to give the pastor a slap in the face? It's really enviable. Being able to touch those soft and delicate little hands makes it worth even a slap. Could this guy have considered this a long time ago and deliberately went over to get slapped? Look at the slim-fitting dress, wearing high leather boots, and the graceful calves, if they could be stepped on. Lucius, Carlyle and several second-generation nobles looked at Ron with anger, this shameless thief. Beautiful lady, no need to be polite, just use hard force and whip him to death. The kingdom of Granville is hopeless. But at this moment, Ron gently held Dolores's slender fingertips, and in the shocked eyes of a group of second-generation nobles, he kissed the smooth and jade-like back of her hand. I don't know. Was it Ron's misunderstanding? She didn't feel any scent of powder on Dolores, but the smooth back of her hands naturally exuded a fresh fragrance, just like roses. It smells good. It was shallow, but it always lingered in Ron's mind. At that moment, the large group of aristocratic young men around them all opened their eyes wide, as if a sacred, pure and untarnished area deep in their hearts had been contaminated. Oh, God, this shameful pastor actually kissed the hand of this beautiful lady. How did he do it? Could this seemingly ordinary priest be a master? Although Ron felt strange looks from around him, he didn't pay attention and sat across from her at Dolores' invitation. A waiter soon prepared the tableware. Dolores' eyes swept across the man opposite him. He had a tall but slightly thin figure, a slightly pale face, and a gentle and bookish manner. At least, from the appearance point of view, the man in front of her was more in line with the image of a prophet than the previous guy. He seemed very quiet, very gentleman. However, the dark red traces on the pure white priest's robe ruined the gentleman's temperament. Noticing Dolores's gaze, Ron spread his hands helplessly. Miss Dolores, please don't worry about these, we just solved a few dirty rats. You know, Larnaca City has a lot of this irritating stuff. Dolores nodded. She did not delve into this issue. According to the intelligence, although Prophet Ron was a gentleman, he also had a violent side. Although it was hard for Dolores to believe that the gentle young man in front of her could slap away the son of Vice Pope Apu. Sir, do you know me? Dolores asked. Dolores was very sure that she had never met Ron, and Ron should not know her. Ron smiled slightly, but didn't answer. He even lowered his head and slowly tasted the fragrant tea in front of him, without even looking at Dolores. On the surface, Ron was as calm as an old dog, but inside he was panicking. He felt that he actually had a pretty good resistance to beauty. It was not like he had never seen beauties before, including Aurelia, Serafina, Cecilia, Christian, and even Elsa. No, I dare say he is battle-hardened, but he is by no means a rookie. But I don't know what happened now. After the hand kiss just now, I always feel that the woman in front of me seems to be becoming more and more attractive. Every move, every frown, every smile shows the charm of women. The graceful figure, crystal lips, bright eyes, slender neck, everything made Ron inexplicably excited. Could it be that the 10 days in the soul-crossing boat were too long? Even Aurelia and Serafina can't completely vent their suppressed desires. Did he really fall in love with this woman? Not that much. In order not to make a fool of himself, Ron could only pretend to lower his head and sip tea. On the opposite side, Dolores's throat also moved silently. Her mood was not much better than Ron's. She is a proud princess, and she doesn't look down on ordinary men at all. But she didn't know what was going on, but the moment Ron's lips kissed the back of her hand, Dolores felt as if a cluster of electric currents coursed through her body. There was an unbearable heat and impulse in my chest and abdomen for no apparent reason. It was a feeling that Dolores had never experienced before, as if there was some strong desire that made her want to get close to the man opposite. Could it be that I really fell in love with him? Is this the power of entangled fate? In order not to lose her princess etiquette, Dolores could only look away from Ron. Of course, the actual situation may not be that complicated. Ron has the blessing of Celios. Although his belief is a bit biased, he is still the god of love after all. If you think about what the current believers of the Eternal Freedom sect look like, you can probably judge what the blessing of Celios is. What effect does it have? Just like the great Saint Christian before, the effect of this blessing can only be exerted to the greatest extent through skin contact. Dolores sprayed ecstasy on herself, a potion 10 times more powerful than infatuation. During the hand kiss, the ecstasy scent had quietly penetrated into Ron's nasal cavity, so much so that the more Ron looked at Dolores, the more seductive she became. In some ways, the two men drugged each other. Dolores knew that she couldn't remain silent for too long. She had quite good cultivation. She suppressed the restlessness deep in her heart and looked at Ron again. Although she was a noble princess, she didn't care about Ron at all. I feel offended by his attitude. If Ron is really a prophet, this kind of behavior is normal. Prophets always have some special powers, no wonder. This is not an easy man to deal with. If you communicate with such people and play with those twists and turns, you might be the one who gets caught in the end. Dolores decided to be honest. Mr. Ron, I'm going to be honest. I got the news that someone wants to kill you. If you want to give the other party a favor, you must make the other party understand his danger. Almost at the same time, a familiar voice sounded in Ron's ears. Beep. The system prompts that the infinite death system is enabled. Mission background. You are a traitor. The Eternal Freedom sect once tried to kill you, but failed. This made the Eternal Freedom sect angry. In order to restore the majesty of the sect, they arranged for stronger apostles to try again. Take your life. Mission goal. Survive. Task description. That is a ghost walking in the darkness. No one can escape from her claws. Will you be the first exception? Task reward. Spirit increased by 300, strength increased by 300. Death countdown. 24 hours. Beep. The system prompts that the infinite death system is enabled. Mission background. Apollon Montgomery is extremely angry that you killed his son and defiled his wife. A judge loyal to Apollon Montgomery is looking for an opportunity to kill you. Mission goal. Survive. Task description. Maybe you don't know how terrifying the Inquisitor is. He is the most cruel existence in the Church of the Goddess of Dawn. If you cannot break free from the Inquisitor's hands, the system recommends that you commit suicide, which may make your death easier. At least you don't have to endure too much torture. Task reward. Free control attribute points 500. Death countdown. 24 hours. Beep. The system prompts that the infinite death system is enabled. Mission background. The Dragon Clan has perished, and the shackles that suppressed many countries no longer exist. Human ambitions have begun to expand, and war is about to come. They are greedy for the wealth brought by black oil, but they always want to find a righteous name for themselves. Points, and the eldest son of the Grand Duke was murdered in a foreign country, which seems to be a good excuse. Mission goal. Survive. Task description. Are you sure you can fight against the witch? The taste of a witch may make you taste despair. Task reward. The reward is calculated based on the number of enemies killed. Each target can get 10 consecutive lottery tickets. 1. Death countdown. 24 hours. Branch of the Church of the Goddess of Dawn. Ron's room. When the slanted sunlight at noon filled the room through the curtains, Serafina and Aurelia finally woke up from their slumber. The two girls were still hugging each other, with their slender legs randomly intertwined. This is actually a very tempting picture, but it is a pity that no one has the opportunity to appreciate it. Get up quietly and get dressed quietly. God, must have been crazy last night. After finally arranging her clothes and washing up, Serafina, whose expression barely returned to normal, took a deep breath and said, I have to go to the city guard. I've been on leave for many days. Aurelia also nodded slightly. I want to go to the library too. Aurelia plans to continue to devote her limited time to the study of the Psalms. The more she studies the Psalms, the more powerful she becomes aware of these powers. Gently push the door open. The sunshine outside the house even made the two women feel a little dazzling. Then they remembered that since Ron fell into a coma, they hadn't left the house for some days. Not far away by the fence, Father Abraham was directing a group of gardeners to clean up the weeds in the flower beds. Ah, the two little girls finally came out. I thought you were going to sleep until night, Father Abraham said with a smile. Serafina, who had just recovered a little, suddenly turned crimson on her face. She didn't even dare to stay here too long and left in a hurry with a red face. Aurelia also had a blush on her face, and then she said with some surprise, Old priest, how do you feel? You seem a little younger. Really? Father Abraham touched his chin narcissistically. The little girl has such a sweet mouth, but I also feel that I have become a lot younger recently. No wonder the nuns look at me a little wrong. They must be greedy for my body and want to do something evil to me. I think back then, the old man, I was also a flower that was loved by everyone in the church, no worse than little brother Ron. Aurelia rolled her eyes angrily, ignored the naughty old priest, and walked straight to the library. However, I still couldn't help but murmur in my heart. Really, I always feel that the wrinkles on old Father Abraham's face seem to be a little less than before. His rickety body seemed to straighten a bit. Just as Aurelia's figure disappeared from sight, Father Abraham's voice suddenly stopped. He sighed as if he was a little lonely, and while recalling the grace of his youth, he walked slowly outside the church. He hates nuns. He hates everything that guy likes. 3 death warnings were issued in a row. This was even more exaggerated than the double death warnings given by Herman and the patrolling envoys of the Eternal Freedom sect. Ron had to admit that every time Elsa opened her mouth, nothing good happened. Ron had already known from Agnes that the Eternal Freedom sect and Vice Pope Apu were planning to attack him. However, this guy Apu is just slander. Who has defiled your wife? That was an accident. Do you understand accidents? By the way, how did Apu know that he had blasphemed against the great Saint Christian? Could it be that this guy has been secretly spying on his wife through some means? What a shameless. If you don't use it, why don't you allow others to use it? Don't you know waste is shameful? The only thing that surprised Ron was that the Spang theocracy was also ready to take action, and their actions were a little faster than Virgil expected. The rewards this time seemed to be quite generous. The strength is increased by 300, the spirit is increased by 300, the freely distributed attribute points are increased by 500, and there are even countless lottery opportunities. But there is no doubt that generous rewards also represent greater dangers. Whether they are judges, apostles, or the so-called witches of Spang theocracy, they are not easy to deal with. Beep, the system prompts. Elsa's voice sounded again. Ron's heart twitched violently. Could it be that there was a 4th death warning? Are there too many people who want to kill me? Is his character so bad? Several thoughts flashed through Ron's mind, but fortunately, he was not so unlucky. Beep. The system prompts that the host activates 3 death warnings at the same time, activating a special mission to survive from desperate situations. Escape from desperate situations. Successfully clear 3 death warnings, and you will get an additional high-level 10 consecutive lottery ticket. 1. Ron's gaze shifted silently, and the surrounding scenes gradually came into view. There were a total of dozens of people in the hall, and most of them were nobles with Dolores as the center, who were distributed in a ring and wanted to get close but didn't dare. Although they lowered their heads and seemed to be communicating in a low voice, their eyes would still drift in the direction of Ron and Dolores from time to time. Of course there are exceptions. There is a woman sitting in the corner of the hall. She is not particularly beautiful, but elegant and dignified. She is leisurely tasting the coffee in front of her. Directly behind Dolores, there was a man in his 30s, holding a copy of the Granville Daily News, and seemed to be very interested in the news recorded on it. Ron slowly turned the teacup with his fingers and smiled softly. What age are you in? You are still pretending to read a newspaper. Can you be more professional? 8 out of 10 lurkers in movies and TV series are reading newspapers. But I didn't see the judge who was serving as a priest. I don't know if he hadn't arrived yet or if he was in disguise. After just a brief glance, Ron already had a basic understanding of the surrounding situation. Dolores waited for Ron's response, and at the same time her golden eyes were staring at Ron. She tried to confirm some of her judgments from the expression on Ron's face. If Ron already knew this, it means Ron is really a prophet. If Ron showed even a little bit of surprise on his face, in Dolores's mind, Ron would become a liar. But what made Dolores feel strange was that the expression on Ron's face looked quite strange. When he first heard the news, he acted extremely calm, and even his movements of drinking tea did not fluctuate at all. But soon, Ron's movements became stiff. There was a slight surprise on his face, and this surprise turned into excitement in less than 2 seconds. What the hell is this? Even though Dolores was very good at judging other people's inner thoughts through changes in their expressions, at this moment, she couldn't tell what Ron was thinking deep inside. It was difficult to judge what Ron was really thinking. Dolores could only cough softly and wake Ron up from his own world. Mr. Ron, did you hear what I said? Ah, of course, of course. Ron nodded. Someone wants to kill me, but I don't know who Princess Dolores is talking about. Is it the judge arranged by Archdeacon Apollon Montgomery? Apostles sent by the Eternal Freedom Sect? Or are you talking about the guests who came from afar from the Spang theocracy? Ron raised his eyebrows. He seemed to be completely unconcerned about the crisis he encountered. Let me think about it. This time the Spang theocracy. How many people did the Congress arrange to come over? The executioners. The secret guards in brocade. There is no doubt that the third witch Princess Lydia is here too, right? Oh, I almost forgot about my stupid brother. According to the game plot, in the game, after Ron was killed and before the Spang theocracy prepared to start a war, it arranged for a group of people to enter the kingdom of Granville to negotiate. The leaders of this group of people are the third witch Princess Lydia and her so-called brother, Melville Copperfield. Hiss. Dolores looked at Ron with shock in her eyes. She had just learned about the information about Melville and the third witch Princess Lydia, but she didn't expect that Ron already knew everything about it. He even told some information that he didn't know about, the judge arranged by Apu, the apostle arranged by the Eternal Freedom Sect. How many people has this guy offended? However, this is enough to prove that Ron is definitely a prophet. You know, Ron has been in a coma before this and just woke up last night. Who else, except the prophet, can have this ability to control everything? But now looking at Mr. Ron's attitude, it is obvious that he does not take these assassinations seriously. The 3 waves of killers who seem to be powerful are just pure clowns to Mr. Ron, and there is no way they can cause any harm to Mr. Ron. Dolores was in awe, and subconsciously sat up straight, placing her little hands on her slender thighs like a lady. There was a slight blush on her face, and she opened her mouth, but she didn't know how to speak, as if she was afraid that she might accidentally offend the being in front of her. After all, this is a real prophet. No wonder Ron was favored by the mysterious captain. And Dolores's change made Lucius and a group of second-generation nobles in Carlisle around them stunned. Ron's ability to kiss this lady's little hand was enough to shock them, but why did this lady seem to be well-behaved now? The kitten's original appearance of a thorny rose seemed to have completely disappeared in an instant. What on earth did this guy do? Master. She was speechless for a moment, and the oppressive atmosphere made Dolores feel a little unbearable. She twisted slightly. Sir, aren't you afraid? Afraid? Ron raised his eyebrows. I can't help it. There are too many people who want to kill me, so I'm used to it. If this is fate, then I will accept it calmly. Ron Tien said shamelessly. Dolores admired Ron's mentality even more. This is the kind of mind that only a true master can have. Whether he is favored or humiliated, life or death is up to him. How many people in this world can achieve such a state? Originally, Dolores hoped to tie Ron to the chariot of the Granville royal family. There was no doubt about the value of the profit. No matter what the price, Dolores could accept it even if she was allowed to marry Ron. After all, there is no one else in the royal family who can be used for marriage except her. She is the only normal princess. If Ron is really a prophet, then he is worthy of her. But now, it is Dolores who has lost her confidence. Ron's level even made Dolores feel ashamed of herself. Maybe it was her who was not worthy of him. Ever since she was a child, this was the first time in 20 years that Dolores was so unsure of herself. She took a deep breath, barely suppressing the strange thoughts that emerged in her heart, and looked at Ron again with her golden eyes. Sir, what do you think of the current situation in Granville? Ron raised his eyebrows, not sure how Dolores changed the topic so abruptly, but he still thought about it seriously. Dolores, Ron doesn't hate this woman, it's better to say he likes her very much. After all, the satisfaction brought by conquering a princess is unimaginable. After a few seconds passed, Ron finally spoke slowly. With the destruction of the Dragon Clan and the loss of the suppression of the Dragon Clan, humans, elves, giants, orcs, all major races and kingdoms, have existences that hold power and strength, and ambition will it's going to expand like crazy. It won't be long before the world is in chaos. The most important thing for the kingdom of Granville right now is training its troops. Only a strong army can protect the dignity and security of the kingdom of Granville. Dolores's eyes were shining, and the man in front of her had the same idea as hers. Her body was shaking with excitement. This was the first time she met someone who could agree with her thoughts. The current royal family and nobles had long lost their original vigor due to the long period of peace. They can't see the danger in the future at all, they just want to get drunk and have fun. They believe that even if there is a world war and the world is in chaos, they are still nobles. Even if they change to another country, their status as nobles will not change in any way. They enjoy the wealth brought by black oil and believe that money can solve everything. However, they do not know that after losing the protection of the Dragon Clan, black oil will become the source of disaster for the kingdom of Granville. If we do nothing, we will wait to be trampled on by our neighboring countries. If the original Dolores wanted to marry Ron, she just used her beautiful and body, coupled with her status as a royal family, in exchange for Ron, a prophet, to support the royal family. There is no emotional entanglement in this, it is just an exchange of interests. So now, Dolores really likes this man. After all, it is not easy to find a spiritually compatible partner. At this moment, Ron's voice sounded, "Is there anything else, princess?" "If there is nothing else, I will go back first." Ron wanted to withdraw. The longer I stayed in front of Dolores, the more attractive this woman became. Ron could hardly suppress the impulse in his heart. He noticed something unusual. Even if it was a woman as charming and beautiful as Elsa, or even a plump and seductive saint like Christian, he had never been so impulsive. "Wait a minute," Dolores said quickly. "There is one last question." "Speaking. I want to know." Dolores hesitated, but it was obvious that she wanted to know the answer to this question. Am I really my father's daughter? This question sounds a little weird. But Ron understood Dolores' concerns very well. Her Royal Highness, please don't worry at all in this regard. You are indeed your father's daughter, Ron said calmly. Dolores suddenly breathed a sigh of relief. It seemed that this problem had been tormenting her for a long time. But, your father may not think so, Ron added. Dolores's body suddenly tensed. Why? You know the reason better than I do. Most of your brothers and sisters are weird, but your appearance and temperament look very normal. It's hard for your father not to doubt whether he has been cuckolded, Ron said. The relationship between you father and daughter will become more and more distant, even worse than a stranger. Even worse than a stranger, that is, an enemy. After all, it was Dolores who personally drove the sword into her father's chest, staged the tragedy of a loving father and a filial daughter. The calm princess was obviously a little flustered after hearing Ron's prophecy. Then, what should I do? Ron tilted his head and thought for a moment, and the expression on his face became increasingly weird. Her Royal Highness Princess Dolores, may I ask? Do you want to be queen? Larnaca City, Noble District. Earl John's body lay quietly on the large and soft bed. The large room was filled with a strong stench. Even if all the windows were opened, this disgusting smell could not be completely released. Virgil is performing rituals to soothe the soul of Earl John. This is the tradition of the Kingdom of Granville. After people die, clergy are often invited to perform one last prayer, hoping that the soul of the deceased can enter the arms of the goddess of dawn. Powerful nobles often hire high-ranking clergymen, such as bishops like Virgil. Virgil was also happy to accept such a job. After all, these nobles were very generous. It's just that, seeing Earl John's wrinkled face, Virgil's brows wrinkled involuntarily. In recent times, gray-haired old people like this have often died. Although it is normal for an old man of this age to die, the strange thing is that every dead old man has a strong stench. It is possible that the corpses of the previous ones were not discovered until a long time ago, so that they rotted and became discolored. Smelly. But this Earl John in front of me was fine last night. Virgil's face was a little gloomy, and his eyes seemed to be able to peek into a large invisible net that was constantly closing. And he, Ron, Aurelia, Serafina, are just small fish in this big net, struggling in vain. Gudong. He squirmed his throat and swallowed a mouthful of saliva. It seems that I need to discuss this with my good brother. Do you want to be queen? Not a queen, but an empress. Ron didn't know that his good brother was talking about him. At this moment, his mind was filled with a crazy idea. Let Dolores become the queen, suppress 113 countries, flatten all major races including humans, orcs, elves, dwarves, and giants, and unify the Twilight continent. Since the repairman has always wanted to close the world line, I have made a mess of the original world line and turned it upside down. I want to see how you can close it. It was as if he had prepared a lot of messed up codes for him, but he wanted to see how the repairman could sort them out. Work overtime and you won't be exhausted. And Dolores is the most suitable person to implement Ron's plan. This is not just for Ron, but also to reverse Dolores' fate. Among the many female protagonists in the game Goddess Kingdom, she has been protecting this country all her life. She hopes that the kingdom will last forever and that the people will live and work in peace and contentment. This is a noble ideal. As long as it is beneficial to the kingdom, Dolores will never refuse. She is one of the few militants in the entire kingdom. It was Dolores who suppressed the nobles, led the kingdom's army, and repelled attacks from surrounding countries again and again, so that the kingdom of Granville could be protected from the trampling of iron hoofs. After the death of Holt 474, the kingdom of Granville also had to face the issue of throne succession. As the eldest princess who protected the kingdom, Dolores undoubtedly had a great reputation. She was more qualified to sit in that position than all the other princes combined. But Dolores is a woman. In the thousands of years of history of the kingdom of Granville, there has never been a queen. There is no doubt that Dolores encountered resistance from a group of conservatives. The kingdom managed to survive surrounded by powerful enemies. Dolores couldn't bear to see Granville divided again, and finally withdrew from the competition for the throne and gave up the throne to her eldest brother, Antoine Holt. And her eldest brother was also very kind to this younger sister. He named Dolores the first female Grand Duke of the Kingdom of Granville, the Grand Duke of Thorns and Roses. Compared to the princess who had no name, the Grand Duke with his own territory obviously had a more respected status. Almost all financial and military power in the territory was in the hands of Dolores alone, which was equivalent to a country within a country. He also specially rewarded Dolores with the title of Destiny General, and additional privileges such as participating in the parliament, meeting the king, being able to wear weapons, etc. It can be said that he doted on this sister to the extreme. In the following years, Antoine gradually took control of the power of the kingdom. When Dolores went to the royal city to attend a court meeting, he was guillotined. The Grand Duke of Thorns and Roses has come to an end. This is Dolores' fate. Dolores was obviously shocked. Her eyes widened and her mouth opened slightly. Do you want to be a queen? Ron's voice still echoed in his ears. After a long time, Dolores rubbed her forehead vigorously. She was indeed a prophet. She dared to say anything. A wry smile appeared on her face. Mr. Ron, I can pretend that I didn't hear what you just said. Do you know that if my father hears the rebellious words you just said, you will be sent to the guillotine immediately? After a brief pause, Dolores spoke again. Also, although you were a prophet, I have to question your words. Because what Ron said before was so explosive, Dolores lost her composure for a moment. Now that she gradually calmed down, she realized that there were actually many loopholes in what Ron said. You said before that my father suspected that I was not of his blood because I was too normal and looked out of place among the many princes and princesses. But my two brothers, the eldest prince and the second prince, are normal, right? They don't have any intellectual or physical defects. Could it be that my father also doubts that they are capable? Clever. Ron smiled. No, your father never doubted your two brothers, he only doubted you. Why? Dolores was a little unbelievable. Because, the abnormality of the prince and princess started from you. Ron said quietly. Ha! Dolores was so shocked that she almost laughed. What is this? It always felt like, according to Mr. Ron, she had become the source of some kind of disaster. Want to know? Ron knew what Dolores was thinking very well. He looked at Dolores quietly. I can tell you, but, for you, these contents may make you very painful. That sight made Dolores tremble slightly, and she felt a sense of fear for no reason, but she still wanted the truth. Ron didn't hide anything, and told Dolores the strange and cruel secret technique practiced by Holt in his 474th life, as well as the means to break the negative effects of the secret technique. Now, Dolores's sword is not sharp enough. If she wants to become the queen, the first thing she must break is her illusion about her father. His eloquence was very good, and he dragged Dolores into the most terrifying abyss little by little, as if he was actually on the scene. Dolores's complexion became paler and whiter, and a dense layer of small pimples appeared on her delicate skin. Use female magicians as tools for spiritual practice. Forcibly plundering the magic power and talents of female magicians, destroying their bodies and souls. What kind of cruel practice method is this? Dolores simply could not overlap such a cruel guy with her kind father. No, this is impossible. You are definitely talking nonsense. My father can never be such a cruel guy. Dolores shook her head desperately. The smile on Ron's face became more mocking. Do you know why almost all of your younger brothers and sisters are deformed? Because your father, while absorbing the magic power and talents of these female magicians, also absorbed their flaws. Once too many flaws accumulate in his body, it may even cause his own existence to collapse. In order to eliminate such flaws, your father worked hard to keep a concubine, and through intercourse, he retained the excellent talents absorbed from the female magician in his own body, and passed the defects on to his offspring. That's exactly the case. Your hundreds of younger brothers and sisters are either mentally disabled or physically disabled. None of them are normal. You are the first. Actually, you are already very lucky, at least you are still alive. Do you know how many of your younger brothers and sisters died just after they came into this world, before they even had time to open their eyes and look at the blue sky? How many younger brothers do you have? My sister, she's already dead before she even left her mother's womb. Dolores's teeth were chattering rapidly. Who would be so cruel to their own child? The hairs on Dolores's body stood up one by one when she thought of the hundreds of strange brothers and sisters in the palace. Children. As if he saw Dolores's thoughts, Ron chuckled. Ha ha, in your father's eyes, you are not his children, not his descendants, you are just flaws that disgust him. It's just the dirt he excreted from his body. Indescribable fear made Dolores tremble all over, and her scalp was about to explode. This is impossible, then why am I normal? No, you are not normal. Ron looked at the eldest princess across from him quietly. Dolores, don't try to deceive me. Dolores's body tensed subconsciously. She was obviously the eldest princess, but for a moment, Dolores felt that the man opposite her was the superior one. She was obviously stronger than Ron, but this man only made her hair stand on end. Those eyes that saw through everything were like whirlpools, tearing at her soul. Are you becoming more and more uncontrollable about your bloodthirsty impulse? Whenever blood splashes on your body, no, even just smelling blood, do you become very excited? Does this excitement become particularly unbearable every night when the moon is full? Do you really think this is normal? Dolores was extremely frightened, and every word Ron said made her eyes tremble like an earthquake. This man really knows everything. Dolores had never been so afraid of a person. She was like a person who was about to drown, panting desperately and breathing in the fresh air almost greedily. Her trembling body caused her hot and towering breasts to ripple like white and delicate waves. After a long time, Dolores finally raised her head, her eyes filled with bloodshot eyes. "Sir, you don't have any evidence to prove what you said." "Evidence?" Ron smiled contemptuously at Dolores's futile struggle. "You can go to the back hill of the palace, where the bodies of thousands of female magicians are buried. You can also go to the royal dungeon. The entrance is under a rockery in the back garden of the palace. Your mother, who died of the plague when you were 6 years old, is imprisoned in the dungeon. Sorry, I really want to give you a hope." The more normal you looked, the more Holt 474 suspected that your mother had cuckolded him, so he imprisoned her in the dungeon, hoping to interrogate the truth. After all, this is an issue related to the king's dignity. This matter can only be done by your father himself. But soon, he caught a group of suitable female magicians who could be used for practice, so he put aside the matter of your mother. The back of the head. Your mother was imprisoned in a dungeon alone, starving to death in a long period of coldness and fear. The earthquake in Dolores' eyes became more and more intense. Her palms were clenched tightly, and her knuckles made a creaking sound. The moment she heard the last few words, it was like a thunderbolt that suddenly exploded in Dolores' mind. Her body trembled violently, and her face turned extremely pale in an instant. "Starved to death. If you go there now, you can probably still see your mother's pale skeleton and a blood letter left for you. Whether what I said is true or false, you can know the truth by returning to the palace and doing a little investigation." Ron smiled softly. Although he was talking about a human tragedy, he seemed to have no feeling at all. Like an indifferent machine, it will not be touched by human emotions. "I just want to tell you that I have no need to deceive you. I just don't want your future to be too desperate. The father who is kind in your eyes is also the enemy who killed 2 of your mothers. When his suspicions fall on you, he will kill you. And if you want to survive, your only chance is to kill him in advance." Encouraging a daughter to kill her father. Ron felt more and more like a villain. The area was deathly silent and silent. No one knew what was going on here. A soundproof barrier had sealed off the surrounding area at some point. Dolores's face turned pale, and her body was shaking convulsively, which she could not control. What Ron said was absolutely terrifying. Her little hands were trembling, and she thought that her eldest brother Antoine once mentioned that he saw the royal guards of the palace leading a group of women into his father's palace more than once in the middle of the night. At that time, I just thought it was a woman that my father had found from outside, and he was preparing to marry a new princess. The quality of those women varies, and some can be described as ugly. What's worse is that some women are already gray-haired. Antoine kept sighing that his father's taste was getting stronger and stronger. She thought about how her mother's family had been deprived of their aristocratic title and demoted to commoners due to inexplicable crimes. All the family property had been confiscated from the state treasury, and several uncles had been sent to the army. She had gone to her father to plead for mercy, but was severely reprimanded by him. It occurred to her that her room had been broken into more than once. Nothing of high value was lost, but all the relics left by my mother were gone. Of course, Dolores would not believe what Ron said just because of these specious pieces of information, which were not even evidence. However, the depression in my heart became more and more intense. When the pot of tea in front of Ron was finally finished, Dolores suddenly let out a long breath and her complexion completely returned to normal. Her skin was white and rosy, and her golden eyes were as bright as ever, no longer depressed. The elegance and dignity of the princess resurfaced in Dolores. "Mr. Ron, what did you just say? I didn't hear you clearly." Dolores is a smart woman, and he will not be surprised at all by making such a choice. "It doesn't matter, it's just nonsense, meaningless." Dolores smiled gently and said, "Sir, you just said that you want me to be the queen. Sir, have you forgotten that I have 2 brothers above me, so it's not my turn no matter what?" Her Royal Highness the princess never mentioned her father again. Ron knew that the eldest princess's thoughts had changed quietly. He rubbed the teacup with his fingers. "You know better than me how stupid your 2 brothers are." Dolores didn't answer, which seemed to be her acquiescence to Ron's words. Her 2 brothers were good at eating, drinking and having fun, but when it came to running the country, forget it. Dolores breathed out. I have no idea of becoming a queen, but I am a little curious about Sir's thoughts. Ron nodded slightly, and then asked, let me ask you, what do you need to control a country? Army, Dolores answered without any hesitation. Ron smiled. Yes, it's the army. Who are the main members of the army? Nobles or civilians? Almost all are civilians, and the middle and lower level officers are almost all civilians. Senior officers and top-level officers are monopolized by the nobles. Ron clapped his hands and praised. Yes, that's it. Since you can understand this, the next content will be easy. After a pause, Ron continued. If you want to become a queen, you must have a force loyal to you. You can first use your own money to buy an army. Seeing that Dolores wanted to speak, Ron waved his hand and continued. Believe me, this matter is easier than you think. According to the kingdom, the deduction of military pay is very serious. Although it was basically impossible to have a war because of the Dragon Clan, things like bandit suppression in the country still happened one after another. However, many soldiers worked hard for the kingdom. Not only did they not get military pay, they even have to bring dry food from home. The pensions for soldiers killed in battle were basically swallowed up by the nobles. These situations directly led to grassroots soldiers and officers complaining against the nobles. If such conditions exist, you don't need to pray to the nobles at all. Why not try to win over these civilians? These nobles have already created an excellent opportunity for you to bribe the army. If you take out enough money, treat it as an investment. The amount must be sufficient. Even if you sell off your property or go out to borrow debt, you have to collect it. Choose an army that has some combat effectiveness but is not taken seriously, preferably one that has just experienced unfair treatment. Bypassing the top officers held by nobles, contact the grassroots privately, and use the money to supplement the military pay for these grassroots soldiers. You give me money and they will give you your life. Dolores's eyes became brighter and brighter, and her breathing became inexplicably rapid. But soon, her beautiful brows wrinkled again. Even so, I can only bribe a small group of soldiers at most. It is impossible to bribe the entire country's army. I have no money. Moreover, it is useless even if you can bribe soldiers from all over the country. These soldiers have not received any real training at all. Their weapons and armor are all incomplete. Such soldiers will just die on the battlefield and cannot exert much power at all. As expected of Dolores, she quickly noticed a flaw in Ron's plan: money. To put it bluntly, no matter how perfect Ron's plan is, it still requires a large amount of gold coins to support it. Money is not simple. The kingdom of Granville is quite wealthy, especially the aristocracy. Their level of luxury is among the best in the entire Twilight continent. Ron smiled and did not take money seriously. Dolores frowned. But those nobles can't just take out the money so easily. They would rather squander the money than invest it in the construction of the army. It can be said that even if one day, the kingdom of Granville is facing destruction, and these nobles would rather give their money to the enemies who trample the kingdom in exchange for their future wealth than invest their money in the army to resist the invasion of the enemy country. The kingdom is so corrupt. Ron shook his head. It doesn't matter, I can give you a little tip to save money. You first summon the nobles to the scene in the name of a banquet. You are the eldest princess of the kingdom. These nobles will give you this face no matter what. Then use the troops you bought before to block the scene. If you don't give money, you won't leave. If you don't cooperate, then find something that violates the laws of the kingdom from these nobles. I think it is very simple. It is easy to find enough crimes in these filthy stupid pigs to put them on the happy platform of Louis XVI. What is the Louis XVI happy station? Dolores interjected. I mean the guillotine. Ron sighed. It felt really bad that no one answered. Dolores had obviously begun to think seriously about what Ron said. The man in front of her seemed to be no longer a prophet, but a strategist. However, even if these soldiers accept the military pay I distribute and are loyal to me, they may not dare to resist the nobles. Ron smiled while stroking his hands. He admired Dolores more and more. This princess could get to the point of the problem every time. What you said is very good, so there is one thing you must complete before preparing for the banquet. What? Dolores asked immediately. Ideological transformation. Ron quickly explained. in this world, the concept of hierarchy is deeply rooted. Nobles are nobles, and civilians are civilians. There is no way to transcend them. Nobles can kill, and rob civilians, but civilians have no sense of resistance at all. You have to change this idea, at least make the soldiers believe that following the eldest princess is right and is destined by fate, so as to offset their fear of the nobles. At this time, you can use some extraordinary power, such as one night, a fox near the military camp suddenly uttered human words, "The empire is rising, the princess is king." A piece of brocade silk was cut out of the belly of a certain fish, and it was written that the nobles would be destroyed and everything would be prosperous, and the princess would be king and the world would be at peace. A stone man was dug out from the bottom of the Seine. The stone man had one eye. The nobles had no virtue and the whole world rebelled. Ron didn't ask Dolores to promote equality for all. People's wisdom has not reached that level yet. When they believe that the nobles are immoral and that Her Royal Highness is destined by fate, they can become your force against the nobles. And this army is enough for you to control the situation at the banquet. Once you get more money from these nobles, you must disperse the money in the shortest possible time to buy more soldiers. Of course, there is another thing you must prepare for. Although the nobles are corrupt, there are still some masters. So, you have to recruit someone who can control the situation. Who? Ariana the Valkyrie. But what if the released nobles convene a parliament to impeach me? Dolores asked subconsciously. Ron was helpless. Oh, my dear princess, don't forget, you have an army. Remember, out of the gun. I mean, out of the sword comes the power. As long as your military power is strong enough, your father may confer you the title of General Tiens. And this is just the first step to achieve your goal. You must understand that even if you supplement the military pay for these soldiers and make these soldiers loyal to you, for a long time, they have lacked weapons, armor, training, and have very poor combat literacy. It is almost impossible to rely on these soldiers to protect the Kingdom of Granville. You need to train their physical fitness and combat capabilities, and most importantly, cultivate their determination and courage to sacrifice for their country. The simplest way is to cultivate the soldiers' sense of honor and publicize that being a soldier is glorious and that the families of soldiers should receive various preferential treatment. To improve the status of soldiers, use the conflicts between a few nobles and soldiers as an example, kill a few nobles, and show that the soldiers proved that you are firmly on their side. Give soldiers the opportunity to be promoted. Those with meritorious service will not only receive official and monetary rewards, but they can even become nobles. Provide good care and support for the families of soldiers, especially the families of deceased soldiers. For the children of soldiers who died, we can arrange to take some idle positions in the royal government agencies to ensure that there will be no problems in their lives in the future and that the soldiers will have no worries. If there are, then introduce a few models. If not, then create a few models yourself. Promote the whole country that this is an excellent soldier, a hero, and the highest honor. It will set off an upsurge in the worship of soldiers in the Kingdom of Granville. At the same time, continue to suppress the nobles, elevate the status of the common people, and gain the support of ordinary people. It can be said that as long as you can do half of this, the soldiers in the army will work wholeheartedly for you, and the people will become your solid backing. When you completely suppress the nobles and take control of the army, your two brothers may be worried about being deprived of their right to inherit the throne. They are preparing to rebel. They were met by you at the palace gate, and then died tragically in the battle. Your men felt your sadness. Seeing that the weather was cold and you were wearing very thin clothes, they thoughtfully put a yellow coat on you. Ron's voice, like the whisper of a devil, still echoed in the ears of the eldest princess. Dolores was shocked and looked at Ron as if she were looking at a devil. This guy is naturally rebellious. Chapter 91. Is this guy really a prophet? Why does that beautiful face look more and more like a devil? He is too unqualified to be a prophet. He should rebel. He is born to be a rebel. At the beginning, Dolores could still interject and occasionally asked a question, but later on, she had no chance to interject at all. To be fair, what Ron said can only be regarded as a program at best, and there are still many details that need to be added or even modified. However, Dolores had to admit that this program was very complete. From the start to the end, when she was wearing the royal, yellow coat, everything was covered. Most importantly, Ron showed thought. Suppress the nobility, suppress the privileged class, elevate the status of civilians and soldiers. For 8,000 years, this was something that no country in the Twilight Continent had ever done. Dolores could feel the unprecedented heat and hope from Ron's thoughts. Ron is neither a devil nor a prophet. He is a master. His ideological realm has far surpassed this era. Perhaps, Ron's strength is not that strong, but his ideological realm is not comparable to that of the blasphemer Archibald and the sage Partridge. Looking at the man in front of her, Dolores even had the illusion that it was difficult to look directly at him. Ron's body seemed to be shining with a holy and bright light. At this moment, Ron's voice came again. Who said that only men can protect Granville? Dolores's eyes suddenly shrank. As expected of a master, a single word can bring a great touch to Dolores. Dolores didn't know what the reason was. Maybe it was because she saw the beggars still wandering in the street corners and alleys despite the prosperity of the royal city. Maybe it was because she saw the common people who were living in poverty and sold their children and daughters for a mouthful of food. Maybe it was because I learned that the gray-haired old man, because he did not want to be a burden to the family and did not want to waste the little food, took the initiative to enter the mountains and forests and never came back. Underneath the prosperity, there is devastation. The feasting and feasting cannot hide the tragedy in the world. Dolores, who was still very young and just a child, was deeply touched like never before. At that moment, Dolores made an unprecedented ambition. She wants Granville Hayen Hetching. She wants the people of the kingdom to have support for their old age and support for their children. She wanted the word, human, to refer not only to the nobles, but also to the common people who could live like real people. Dolores admired Ron's thoughts, but she didn't know that her thoughts were obviously beyond this era, and in some ways, they were no less than Ron's. However, one problem Dolores had to face was, there was no place for her to display her ambitions in Granville. She was a princess, but only a princess. Sooner or later this kingdom will be handed over to the hands of the two brothers. Being a woman has become the heaviest shackles on Dolores. But now, Ron's light words broke the shackles that had been entangled with Dolores. Who says only men can protect Granville? If you are not willing to give it a try, a dream will always be just a dream. At this moment, Ron saw something different in Dolores's eyes, which was a light called ambition. Her breath is changing. No longer as depressed and hesitant as before, she became confident and energetic. Her eyes really are as bright as gold. The most beautiful smile appeared on her face, and she looked at the man opposite her again. Originally, she was following her father's order, and for the sake of the kingdom and the royal family, she would win over Ron, the prophet, no matter what the price. Even if Ron asked her to give him a child, Dolores would not refuse. As long as it was beneficial to the royal family and the kingdom, Dolores would not hesitate in the slightest. She would even take the initiative to do so. Once she has a child, Ron will never betray the royal family. But now, Dolores found that even if all the benefits of the deal were excluded, she did not hate this marriage. She had never appreciated a man as much as she did now. She must make this man her husband. If this man were to live in other countries, it would be a disaster for Granville. And Dolores's character is more decisive than Seraphina's. Whatever she likes, she must get it. Her beautiful body had already stood up, and her slender fingertips gently lifted the hem of her scarlet dress. Dolores made an impeccable courtesy to Ron. "Mr. Ron, can you please be my husband?" Dolores has enough confidence in her body and appearance. In the huge royal city, only the great Saint Christian can compete with him in the charm of women. Ron was holding the teacup. Her character was still the same as the one in the game. He looked in the direction of Dolores, his eyes sliding along the hot, well-proportioned figure of the eldest princess. The close-fitting red dress outlines the most exciting curves. Waist, raised hips, rounded thighs. He knew that this was a stunner who could make a man drunkenly. Ron was not surprised at all by Dolores' request. After drinking the tea in one gulp, Ron finally spoke. "Do you mind being small?" There was a sudden strong fluctuation next to Dolores. It was obvious that someone was shocked by the conversation between Dolores and Ron. The eldest princess of the kingdom actually asked a man she just met on the first day to be her husband. And this man actually asked the princess if she could be a little girl. What happened to this world? A certain being feels that his worldview is collapsing crazily. Ron noticed the movement around Dolores, but he didn't care. He knew very well who the person beside Dolores was. This is not the first time Ron has faced similar problems. Aurelia once asked him if he wanted to take away her virginity. Serafina once asked him if he could give her a child. Ron refused them all, and the reason was very simple. If he had agreed directly at that time, although he could have tasted the beauty of Aurelia and Serafina, it would probably have led to the complete failure of the two raiders. However, when facing Dolores, Ron agreed, because whether he agreed at this time would not have a decisive impact on the subsequent complete victory over Dolores. If Dolores is willing to accept being a child, Ron would not mind going upstairs with Dolores right away and having a wonderful in-depth conversation about what it means to be surrounded by mountains and gurgling rain. Dolores opened her mouth slightly, her face full of astonishment. It was obvious that this very decisive princess was also shocked by Ron's words. She had thought about Ron's various answers, and Mr. Ron might refuse. After all, her proposal was too abrupt and might be regarded as a trap. Mr. Ron may also agree. After all, she is really beautiful. Her figure may not be as exaggerated and tolerant as the Christian saint, but she is big where she should be, thin where she should be, and perky where she should be. There are also a pair of long legs, which are still very lethal to men. However, Dolores never expected that Mr. Ron would actually ask her if she wanted to be a child. Is this too exaggerated? After all, she is also a princess, okay. It can even be said that she is the only princess in the entire kingdom of Granville who can take advantage of her. How noble is her status that she actually wants to be a child for others. For a moment, Dolores had countless thoughts in her head. Ron smiled slightly. Miss Dolores, please forgive me, I can't help it. I already have two. Ah no, there may be 3 women soon. 2 are nuns from the Church of the Goddess of Dawn, and 1 is the only daughter of the Marquis of York. It is impossible for me to leave them behind. If you insist on me being your husband, I will only be wronging you. Even though these words were spoken by Ron himself, they felt that they were a bit too much. Not to mention the eldest princess, any normal woman with no brains would be able to agree. However, although Ron wants to capture Dolores, obtain the noble heart, and change Dolores' tragic fate, Ron also cannot abandon Aurelia and Serafina. At this moment, the eldest princess in front of her suddenly took a deep breath and stared at Ron with eyes like gold, which even made Ron's hair tingle. Dolores said in a deep voice, Mr. Ron, I agree to your request, but our first child must have my last name. Yeah, he suddenly realized that Her Royal Highness the Princess might really have a problem with her brain. At this moment, a figure walking downstairs suddenly stopped. Melville thought he was handsome. This is not narcissism. After all, his reputation as a playboy in Spang theocracy is well known to everyone. He has enjoyed so many business ladies, aristocratic daughters, and elegant ladies. He is also a lifelong diamond member of the House of Succubus, the largest brothel in Spang theocracy. He never failed to pick up girls. Melville felt that this had nothing to do with his identity as the Grand Duke's legitimate son and the future heir of the Copperfield family. Those women were willing to commit themselves to him purely because of his exaggerated personal charm. It was precisely because of this confidence that Melville struck up a conversation with Dolores without any hesitation, and then got a hit. I wanted to take the opportunity of reporting work to see if I could get closer to the 3rd Princess Lydia, but I got another bad word. Melville is very good at self-regulation. He does not blame himself, nor does he feel that he is not charming enough. Perhaps the 2 beauties are just too shy. As long as he comes a few more times, he will be able to win over both women sooner or later. After arranging the work, Melville came downstairs again. He was excited to find that the beautiful woman had not left, and was still sitting in the seat by the window. He wanted to continue his work, but he did not expect that the beautiful woman was right there. Opposite me, there was an extra man. What surprised Melville even more was that the man opposite the beauty was the target of his assassination this time, his brother, Ron Copperfield. Due to the existence of the soundproof barrier, Melville could not hear the conversation between the two, but since he could be sent to a foreign country to perform assassination missions, Melville naturally received professional training. He knows lip reading. After reading the contents of the exchange between Dolores and Ron through his lips, Melville's body shivered violently, and his originally handsome face became twisted as if it were a ghost. He did not fall in love with Dolores. Although she was a very beautiful woman, as dazzling as gold, in Melville's eyes, a woman in a foreign country was just a spice during the journey, a toy. What Melville really couldn't accept was that this woman just simply left when facing him. When facing Ron, she actually asked Ron to be her husband, and was even willing to be her husband. This woman has even thought of a name for her child. Is Melville, the legitimate son of the Copperfield family, worse than a born to a maid? For a moment, Melville's face turned hideous with jealousy. At this moment, Ron seemed to feel something, and his eyes involuntarily glanced towards the stairs. When he saw Melville, who was shaking all over and looking ferocious, Ron was slightly startled, and then he smiled at Melville. The moment he saw Melville, the incomplete memories in Ron's mind were automatically activated. He recognized Melville's identity. Then, he smiled mockingly at the brother who was about to kill him. Hiss. Visible to the naked eye, Melville's body trembled violently, his eyes were as wide as bells, and his 2 rows of neat teeth were clenched together so hard that his knuckles were turning white. He was laughing at him. The urge to kill Ron was stronger than ever. Melville has always disliked or even hated this brother. It was precisely because of this guy that his status as the eldest son became his legitimate son. The son of a humble maid actually became his brother, which made Melville feel that the noble blood of the family had been tarnished, and he was also humiliated. When he was young, he actually dared to slap himself for hitting his mother. He remembered that slap for more than 10 years. And now, such a despicable person actually hooked up with the woman he wanted to get, and he actually dared to laugh at himself. If Melville originally only planned to kill Ron, now he even wanted to use the most cruel methods to make Ron suffer the most desperate pain before dying. He wanted to trample his dignity severely under his feet and crush his soul. He wants to peel off this fool's skin and cramps, bruise his bones and spread ashes. However, no matter how strong the urge was in Melville's heart to kill Ron, he could only forcefully suppress it by clenching his fingers. He wanted to kill Ron quietly, there was no point in killing Ron in public. At this moment, Ron suddenly stood up. He did not pay attention to Melville anymore, as if he was just a passerby worth mentioning. He stared quietly at Dolores opposite, and smiled softly. It is an honor for me to be favored by the lady. I don't really care about kids' last names. Does Miss have anything else to do? If not, I would like to leave for a while. I have some personal matters that need to be dealt with. It's a pity. If he hadn't discovered Melville, he would have really wanted to have a further and more in-depth communication with Dolores right away. Although these 3 waves of death warnings had a 24-hour time limit, they came faster than expected, and Ron had to prepare in advance. Dolores narrowed her eyes and asked, "Do you need my help? If possible, I would like to invite you to sit in my room." Ron shook his head slightly. "Please believe me, I can handle this little thing myself. As your future husband, I can't always rely on women for protection." Dolores was involved in Ron's longer-term arrangement. He didn't want the princess to be involved in his current plan so that she would be noticed by some existence prematurely. Without saying a word, Ron walked straight towards Dolores, no, to be precise, behind Dolores. In the corner behind Dolores, there was the young man who was reading a newspaper. He had read the Granville Daily News over and over several times. Bah, bah, bah. The crisp sound of footsteps penetrated the young man's ears, which obviously made him a little nervous. Although his movements did not change, his body was still subconsciously tense. The fingers holding the newspaper were obviously harder, and wrinkles appeared on the newspaper. Finally, the footsteps stopped. The young man could clearly feel the gaze of the man opposite him. According to the intelligence, this is just a very weak waist. He is just a scholar and has no fighting ability. He could crush someone like this's head with one hand. However, he didn't know what was going on. When this man walked up to him and looked at him, he felt a bone-chilling coldness. It seemed that what was staring at him was not a scholar, but an even more indescribable existence. His throat continued to squirm as he swallowed saliva, and beads of sweat began to form on his forehead. In just a few seconds, he had reached the limit of his mental endurance. With slightly trembling fingers, he put down the Granville Daily News in his hand, revealing a slightly pale face. The muscles on his face twitched slightly, and he forced a smile. "Sir, is something okay?" Ron didn't answer. He tilted his head and continued to stare at the young man. More and more beads of sweat appeared on the young man's face. "Your name is K. Cross Cruz. K. By the way, your name is Cruz, right?" His voice was soft, but the eyes of the young man named Cruz suddenly shrank. How did Ron know his name? The identity of each member of the Spang Theocratic Guards is kept strictly confidential. How did Ron learn about it? Cruz's lips moved, and he subconsciously made a sound. "How do you know?" Before he finished speaking, Ron's eyes suddenly glowed with silvery light. Mental interference. The special magic recorded in Ostara's fragment. Although Ron only got the upper part of the fragment, which is not comprehensive, this secret book still records almost all the low-level magic of the entire Dawn Goddess Church, and some of the intermediate magic. There are even many magics in Dawn. It has been lost in the Church of the Goddess. Mental interference is one of them. This is a magic that is somewhat similar to consciousness manipulation, but the effect is not that powerful. Accordingly, it is not so complicated to use. It cannot directly control the opponent, but it can make the target's thinking slow. This magic can be released through two methods: eyes and sound. Cruz, who had been staring at Ron, was hit almost immediately when the magic was released. His expression suddenly became stiff, his eyes became sluggish, and even his words became intermittent. His fear could be clearly seen through his eyes. Cruz had already sensed something was wrong. He tried to break free from this weird state, but his body was completely out of control and he couldn't concentrate at all. I could only watch Ron with a smile on his face, slowly stretched out his right hand and clasped it on his forehead. The next moment, Ron's arm suddenly exerted force. Snap! It was like a bird egg that had been hit hard. In an instant, everyone in the audience was shocked. The sound of cracking bones penetrated the ears of everyone in the hall. Red and white slime slid down the snow-white wall, and the glass next to it was also covered in a layer of dazzling scarlet. Except for the sound of knives and forks falling to the ground, there was no sound in the entire hall. A pair of eyes were stunned, and I felt cold all over. Especially the group of second-generation nobles who were originally a little unhappy about Ron taking away Dolores, were even more horrified at this moment, with goosebumps all over their bodies. They kept rejoicing in their hearts. Fortunately, they didn't go up to stir up trouble. Otherwise, it would probably be them who had their heads stuck to the wall, the floor, and the glass, and couldn't be detached. "Who is this kid? How dare you violently kill people in public? So manly." The priest's robe stained with scarlet blood, the gentle scholar, and the faint smile on his face made Ron's image even more terrifying. Melville's expression suddenly turned gloomy to the extreme. He knew that it was Ron's provocation to him. Ron didn't care at all about the sight of everyone around him. He took off Cruz's storage ring, and soon, two more things appeared in his hand. A token, a money bag. With a flick of his hand, the blood-stained token was thrown out by Ron. Snap! Seeing the token falling on the dish, Lucius, the legitimate son of Earl Sharp, was not as panicked as the others at the table. He frowned, endured the nausea in his chest, took out a handkerchief, and pinched the token, got up. Although the token was full of dirt, a scarlet secret word still caught Lucius's eyes. His pupils shrank suddenly. The Spang Theocracy's largest spy organization, the Royal Guards. Is this a spy from the Spang Theocracy who infiltrated the kingdom? Soon, an excited smile broke out on his face. Although he was the legitimate son of Earl Sharp, he was not the only legitimate son. Who could inherit the title of Earl would ultimately depend on which brother was more capable. And killing the Imperial spy is definitely an incredible feat. Investigate the guests from the Spang Theocracy in Larnaca City, especially the Sykes Hotel. Kill them. Lucius's cold voice reached the ears of the bodyguard beside him. Not every second-generation nobleman is as incompetent and stupid as Herman. Although Lucius is the son of a nobleman, he also yearns for adventure. He once traveled to the Twilight Continent while concealing his identity. His countless adventures gave him far greater strength and a keener sense of smell than ordinary young noblemen. And these bodyguards around him, and they are the companions he made during his travels. They are stronger than Lucius. Lucius's voice also penetrated into the ears of other nobles, and the originally silent hall suddenly became agitated. Sometimes, you don't need to do it yourself to kill someone. The familiar, snow-white slender calves appeared on Ron's chest, the smooth jade feet swayed gently in front of Ron's eyes, and the round knees swept Ron's lips from time to time. Elsa appears again at just the right time. I don't know if it was Ron's illusion, but I always felt that Elsa seemed a little more agile than before. She even opened a back door for Ron within the scope of her authority. Beep. The system prompts, "Congratulations to the host for successfully killing the Ginny Secret Guard 1, and receiving the reward of 10 consecutive lottery tickets won in advance." Ron turned a deaf ear to the changes in the hall, grabbed the blood-stained money bag, and walked straight to the counter. With a snap, Ron dropped the money bag on the service desk. "There are enough gold coins in here. Clean up the place and prepare a room for me." "Huh." The familiar waiter let out a heavy breath. This guest would cause a different sensation every time he appeared. It was really a headache. However, as long as you pay, there is nothing you can do. Uncertain. "Here is your key. Your room is on the top floor, next to the blonde lady." The waiter winked at Ron ambiguously. The corner of Ron's mouth twitched slightly. "You were really considerate." "Thanks." After thanking the gentleman, Ron took the key and headed upstairs. Melville's figure stood straight at the top of the stairs, staring at Ron with a pair of sinister eyes like poisonous snakes. "Long time no see, this big brother has really changed a little bit." Melville didn't even know how strong his willpower was to suppress the urge in his chest to tear Ron into pieces. Ron's figure stopped in front of Melville. Seeing Melville wanting to kill him, but not daring to do it directly here, he felt inexplicably happy. Perhaps, the memory of the original owner of the body had some influence on Ron, making Ron not have the slightest fondness for this so-called younger brother. After staring at Melville silently, Ron silently raised his hand, smeared the scarlet and thick white mucus on his palm bit by bit, and wiped it on Melville's clothes. Seeing Melville's face getting more and more ugly, Ron even helped him tidy up his collar. He had no choice but to take care of his younger brother. It was an older brother's responsibility. He didn't stop until all 10 fingers were cleaned, and then glanced at Melville. "My stupid brother." Roll. When this word entered Melville's ears, Melville's whole body was trembling, and he even felt layers of dense goosebumps appearing on his skin. "I was once told by that blonde woman to get lost. Princess Lydia once told her to get lost. Now, even this eldest brother, whom he has always looked down upon, dares to tell him to get out." The pitying looks in the hall made his scalp almost explode. Are they pitying him? Does he need to be pitied by others? Seeing Ron so close, a voice kept roaring in Melville's heart. "Kill him, kill him, kill him, kill him." He looked like a complete madman, his eyes full of scarlet. But in the end, he can only look like a clown. Taking a deep breath, I stepped away from the stairs. So, this kind of wishing to kill me, but giving me a helpless expression is the best thing. Ron chuckled and walked upstairs without any rush. In the hall, an ordinary-looking but elegant lady who had been sitting in the corner slowly put down the coffee cup in her hand. 2 slender, graceful fingers that did not match the appearance held a gold coin and placed it gently on the table. Ignoring the weird atmosphere in the hall, he quietly disappeared through the door. I don't know how much time passed, but by the time Ron had reached the top floor, there was suddenly a heartbreaking roar from downstairs, like a wild dog, followed by a thumping sound, like someone incompetent and furious. The guy is banging his head against the wall. It doesn't matter if you smash your head, but don't smash someone else's wall, you'll have to pay for it. The key turned slightly in the lock, and with a click, Ron pushed the door open. After a casual glance, it seemed that the waiter treated this generous guest quite well. Ron just asked the other party to arrange a room at will, and this was obviously a high-end suite. It was even more luxurious than the room assigned to the prophet Ron by the church. There is no trace of color on the whitewashed walls, and the chandelier with a complicated style is emitting soft light. The whole room is hazy, but it does not make people feel dim at all. The light pink color reveals some ambiguity. In the open wardrobe, you can see some hot clothes, maid outfits, nun outfits, and even some high heels, whips, candles, gags and other gadgets. On the bedside table, there are also 2 bottles of potions that can quickly restore energy and physical strength. Each bottle costs 10 gold coins. The enthusiastic waiter arranged a room for him. Ron's forehead was covered with black lines. He didn't know whether to call the waiter troublesome or praise him for being considerate. Sitting on the edge of the bed, he did not clean the stains on his body. He immediately opened the lottery system and smashed the 10 consecutive lottery ticket into it. Beep. The system prompts, "Congratulations to the host for using a 10 consecutive lottery ticket, and obtained a healing potion 2, a magic recovery potion 1, a physical recovery potion 1, a strengthening stone 1, an advanced skill, Blade Storm 1, special props, Undead Crystal 1, epic equipment, Hercules Bracer 1. Special props, advanced contract document 1. I don't know if the system saw him as being very dangerous this time, or if the dozens of previous draws triggered the guarantee mechanism. All in all, the harvest was quite good. At least, I got a copy of advanced skills and an epic piece of equipment. Onlia A. Blade Storm, this is a warrior skill, I should be a priest. Ron learned Blade Storm with a weird look on his face, and imagined himself twirling the ironwood staff in circles. To be honest, it might be a bit bad. When looking at Hercules' wristband, the expression on Ron's face became even weirder. This is a whole series of equipment, although it is not a set and does not have set attribute bonuses. The whole series is the best of the warrior type. Is this the intention to make him a nanny with high defense and high attack? Hercules' bracers. Purple Gold Epic, evolvable. Enhancement level, 0. Physical defense plus 58. Magic defense plus 27. Additional special attributes. Physical defense plus 223. Additional special attributes. Full magic defense plus 109. Additional special attributes. All attribute damage reduction plus 9%. The enemy's attacks are not that terrible, are they? Just like what he remembered, Hercules' wrist guard added high defense and pretty good damage reduction. He silently took out a strengthening stone and placed it on the wrist guard. To be honest, Ostara took out her heart and continued to abuse the goddess of dawn behind her back, which made Ron feel a little guilty. After 3 consecutive reinforcement failures. Praise the goddess of dawn. With 13 soft white light flashes, the properties of Hercules' wristbands have changed significantly. Hercules' bracers. Purple Gold Epic, evolvable. Enhancement level, 13. Physical defense plus 1024. Magic defense plus 472. Additional special attributes. Physical defense plus 223. Additional special attributes. Full magic defense plus 109. Additional special attributes. All attribute damage reduction plus 9%. Additional special effect. All attribute damage reduction plus 9%. Additional special effect. All attribute damage reduction plus 9%. Additional special effect. All attribute defense enhancement plus 17%. Dodge. What is dodge? Kala A. Seeing the effect of Hercules' strengthened wrist guards, Ron let out a heavy breath. Although there is no special skill such as the protection of Hercules that can be used to save lives like the Ring of Hercules, the effects and attributes of the Hercules bracer will be praised by anyone who comes here as top-notch. With super high defense bonus, super exaggerated all attribute damage reduction, and all attribute defense enhancement, this wristband provides even more exaggerated defense and damage reduction than armor. Perhaps, it's like the last sentence, dodge, what is dodge? Ron even had an impulse in his heart. When the killer appeared later, he would stand in front of the killer, tilted his head and pointed at his neck and told him, "Here, chop here, you're welcome." But after thinking about it briefly, Ron gave up the urge to commit suicide. Ron put the wristband on his wrist, and then placed 2 warning magics at the door and window. Once someone broke in, his soul would feel a subtle sting, even if he fell asleep. Wake him up. Sitting in front of the desk, after placing a circle of warning magic around himself, his consciousness finally fell into the ultimate tranquility. He thought of the remnant soul of Celios he had encountered on the soul-crossing boat. Celios said that he had given him a blessing. Although Ron didn't know when it was, looking back now, this kind of blessing may really exist. For example, he could fight with 2 girls, Serafina and Aurelia, for several hours, and still remain golden. Thinking back to Celios, who is half male and half female, both male and female, could the blessing he received be to increase his masculine charm and improve his endurance? He is such an unreliable god. Can't he give him some blessings that can increase his combat power? Ron complained in his heart, As for the current blessing, he still likes it very much. Of course, Celio's blessing should be more than just that simple. This blessing seems to be able to reduce the hostility of the opposite gender towards oneself to a certain extent and increase the favorability of the opposite gender towards oneself. This is most obvious in Christian. Based on Ron's understanding of this great saint, even though he was a prophet, he still killed Herman. When his head was buried in her chest, she crushed her little one. My head is already considered merciful, and there is absolutely no way I can hold it back. Dolores's performance, based on Ron's experience in the game, was considered normal, but it was hard to say that it was not affected by Celio's blessing. But does this blessing really only have this effect? Ron tried to examine the body, but didn't sense anything unusual. Immediately, he sank his spirituality into consciousness and fell into a state of trance. This state is called meditation among practitioners. Through meditation, practitioners can examine their own souls. Although he was a legal professional, this seemed to be his first time meditating, and an endless blackness appeared in front of his eyes. Very rich black, like thick ink. Ron felt that his body and lips must be twitching now. Is his soul so dark? Isn't it? Although he is a villain, he should be a good person. This is certified by the Church of the Goddess of Dawn. His spirituality extended over and searched in this thick darkness. He didn't know what he was looking for. Maybe he just wanted to find a different light in this darkness. In a meditative state, the passage of time cannot be perceived. Ron didn't know how long he had been exploring here. Finally, he saw an oval light ball floating in the spiritual space. Weird purple. Ron's spirituality extended over and touched the illusory purple. The surrounding darkness suddenly distorted, and in an instant, an extremely complex outline was reflected in Ron's spiritual space. It was a very complex pattern, just like the 3D map projection on a map. Ron, who has experienced the influence of modern high technology, easily accepted this complicated pattern. After some inspection, Ron found that this pattern should be based on the Sykes Hotel. No, to be precise, it should be centered on itself. It encompasses at least 2 surrounding streets. Roughly, it is a circular area with a diameter of about 700 meters. If you look carefully, you can even detect some small white dots in this circular area. Ron was a little curious, and his spirituality tried to contact one of the white spots. In an instant, a very bad picture appeared in front of Ron. On the messy bed, squeaking and crackling sounds were mixed together. A man with a twisted face, holding a brown single ponytail in one hand, looked like a knight on the battlefield, galloping on his horse. The red-faced man roared excitedly, "Oh, praise the God of eternal freedom. I'm sick." Immediately afterwards, there was a woman's high-pitched scream. Ron withdrew from the white dot angrily, feeling as if his spirit had been polluted. These white dots turned out to represent the believers of Celio's. The infiltration of the Eternal Freedom sect into the kingdom of Granville is really scary. Dozens of small white dots can be seen within a diameter of about 700 meters. These are all members of the Eternal Freedom sect. It is obvious that the branch has been disbanded. Even the Sykes Hotel has several, and it is worthy of being a famous gun room. Let me see which one is closest to us. As soon as he took a glance, Ron's spirituality screamed. The nearest white spot, right behind him. In the spiritual space, Ron could clearly see a white dot slowly approaching 3 meters behind him. The white dot symbolizes the followers of the Eternal Free sect. At this moment, there was only one believer of the Eternal Freedom sect who would sneak into his room silently and in an extremely strange way. Come to assassinate your own apostle. If Ron's consciousness returns now, his physical body will definitely tremble and he will break out in a cold sweat. He has obviously arranged warning magic at the door and window. This warning magic is a lost secret technique recorded in Ostara's fragment. Moreover, the warning magic itself is very secretive, and even if its strength far exceeds its own, it will be difficult to detect it. Being able to not trigger the warning magic at all, and then contact the location where the other party appeared, this apostle seemed to have entered the room through some kind of wall penetration technique. Of course, even if you have the ability to penetrate walls, you will still be detected by the 360-degree warning magic when you are 2 meters away from Ron. Although the time left for Ron was not much, it was still okay to barely use extreme dodge. At least he could avoid the opponent's first sneak attack. Although he was startled at the beginning, there was no need to worry about the real danger. Ron's consciousness gradually withdrew from the spiritual space and returned to the body. He silently opened a book on the table in front of him, The Spiral of Truth. This is not a very popular book. The content of the book is obscure and difficult to understand, and only some scholars can delve into it. Ron's eyes fell on the words, but his consciousness was thinking. Wall penetration. It seems that no one among the 13 apostles can use this skill. No, although there is no skill directly called wall penetration, there seems to be a guy who is good at using earth escape and can achieve similar effects. The 9th seed of the 13 apostles, the ghost assassin, Charlene. A female apostle who is good at disguise and assassination. Her strength is pretty good, but her IQ is a little, well, she's not very outstanding, she's not stupid, she just lacks a brain and looks a bit cute. In my impression, she was a woman who wore tight leather clothes all day long. Her appearance was okay, but she was a bit different from Aurelia and Dolores. What really catches the player's attention is the absolutely hot figure wrapped in a tight leather jacket, especially a pair of exaggerated long legs. What is really weird is that Agnes, one of the 4 pillars of God's favorites from the Eternal Freedom sect, worships him like a god. And now, Charlene, one of the 13 apostles, is preparing to take her own life. Ron's bad habit happened again. No matter how stressful and exciting the environment was, some distracting thoughts that had nothing to do with the situation at hand would always appear in his mind. Charlene should have almost touched the warning magic. Ron didn't pick up the ironwood staff and hid it behind him. Charlene would probably dodge it. If it hit the floor and penetrated the floor, a large amount of compensation would be required. Wow! Ron turned to the next page, staring at the Spiral of Truth in front of him from beginning to end, as if he was completely unaware of the approaching danger. Under the soft magic lamp, a translucent shadow looms, very shallow, but if you keep staring for a long time, you can still see the outline of a woman. A sharp dagger has quietly appeared in the palm of his hand. 2 meters. As long as she gets closer, at a distance of 1.5 meters, she can guarantee that no one can escape her sneak attack. Charlene is the best killer. The quality that a killer needs most is patience. Even if the man's vest is right in front of her eyes, she will not have any impulse. No matter what kind of task she is performing, Charlene will ensure that her success rate reaches 1%. 100. She didn't show the slightest disdain because Ron was still reading. As a killer, laughing at your target is the stupidest thing you can do. The dagger has been lifted by Charlene. As long as she takes another step forward, the sharp dagger will instantly escape from Charlene's palm and then appear in Ron's heart. The Eternal Free Church does not allow apostates to exist. At this moment, a voice suddenly came from the front. Charlene, hello. Mental interference. Buzz. A soft voice floated in her ears. Charlene, who had just raised her long legs, suddenly stopped in place, and her chestnut eyes suddenly shrank. The impact of the sudden soft voice was no less than thunder, and Charlene lost the ability to think for a moment. Ah, be careful with the vase on your left, don't touch it. That soft voice was like some kind of guidance. Charlene turned around suddenly, and her flying belt just hit the vase by the window. Snap! The vase fell from the windowsill and broke into pieces. What a shame, Ron sighed. Seeing the broken pieces on the ground and the water droplets splashing on the tights, a chill rushed from the soles of Charlene's feet to her forehead. Ron, he had known for a long time that he was planning to assassinate him. Know your presence in the room. He even knew his exact location and his name. The scariest thing is knowing you're going to break the vase next to the window. Could it be that the rumored ancient scholar kidnapped by the Eternal Freedom sect is actually a prophet? Is this true? Except for the prophet, Charlene could not understand at all who could possess such mysterious power. Looking at the man in front of him, he was still sitting quietly in front of the desk. He seemed to dislike that the gas lamp on the desk was a little dim and turned it a little brighter. From the beginning to the end, the man did not turn his head to look at him, as if he, the killer, was far inferior to him. The words in front of him attracted his attention even more. However, that mysterious demeanor of being in control permeated the entire room. Charlene couldn't even muster the courage to continue the assassination after her whereabouts were exposed. Since the other party was a prophet and knew everything, Ron had already controlled her next actions. There is no point in continuing the assassination. He must have been prepared to deal with it. Don't you go ahead and do it. Ron's voice came from the desk. As long as you go a little further, within a range of 1.5 meters, your assassination is the most terrifying of all killers. Your special talent can make the dagger in your hand appear instantly. No, it should be said to replace a part of the other person's heart, thereby directly taking away the other person's life. Charlene pursed her lips. Look, he really knows everything. He even knew her special talent, which was her biggest secret. The believers of the Eternal Freedom Sect, and even the four-pillar Divine Envoy, only know that she has a very high success rate in assassination when she is close to her, and she almost never misses, but they don't know exactly how she does it. But the man in front of her could directly tell her talent. Fortunately, he didn't take action. He must have taken measures to deal with his talent, such as magical interference. Otherwise, there would not be obvious disappointment in his tone. If Ron had known that he would come to kill him, then the surroundings of this room. Charlene's eyes shrank again, her body tensed, and she peered around with the corner of her eyes. Although the room was quiet, it seemed that a powerful enemy might appear from the void at any time. She was not in a hurry to escape. It was the stupidest behavior to expose her back to the other party when there might be an ambush around her. Of course, Charlene didn't know that her actions had revealed all her innermost thoughts. Please do not worry, I'm the only one in the room. Ron's voice came from the front again, as soft and calm as ever, without any fluctuation. There is a chair behind you, you can sit down first. Tisk, only a fool would believe it, Charlene muttered in her heart. Snapped. Ron finally closed the book in front of him. He sighed quietly, seeming a little regretful that the rare time of being able to read was broken. Would you like something to drink? Coffee or black tea? Ron stretched his arms and walked towards the cabinet next to him. There was a kettle and several cups on it, plus some ground and prepared instant coffee and black tea. As if she felt that there was no point in continuing to remain invisible, Charlene pursed her lips and finally dispelled the invisibility spell. She opened her mouth slightly, but Ron didn't give her a chance to speak. Let's have coffee. You seem to like coffee very much. Have you been drinking it in the hall all morning? Charlene's expression changed again. This man had noticed her a long time ago, so she thought her casual clothes were perfect for hiding. He really knows everything. This feeling of having everything seen through made Charlene feel a strong sense of frustration. Charlene did not try to escape again. She was convinced that in the face of this controlling existence, any attempt to escape or assassinate would be in vain. Charlene has carried out hundreds of missions, but has never encountered such a formidable enemy. The only good thing is that the other party doesn't seem to have any plans to kill him for the time being. At this moment, Ron, who was holding 2 cups of coffee, finally turned around and glanced at the very obedient female assassin sitting on the chair. Well, it was the same as in the memory. No, it was even more exaggerated than in the memory, tight and tight. Clothes are indeed the most flattering clothing. Look at her plump chest, slender waist, and especially her exaggerated long legs. Even a woman who doesn't look particularly outstanding still adds to her heart-stirring charm. It seems that to facilitate the assassination, her chestnut hair was cut short, just reaching her mouth, giving people a clean and neat feeling. In fact, Charlene can also afford the word good-looking, but compared to Dolores, Christie a top beauty-like and is just a little inferior. A white belt that was completely opposite to the black tights was tied around her waist. It was this belt that accidentally broke the vase just now. Although from Ron's perspective, Charlene's waist was slender enough that she didn't need a belt to accentuate it. Ron handed over a cup of coffee. The slender fingers wrapped in black gauze cloth took the coffee obediently and quietly. By the way, which one of the 4 divine messengers asked you to kill me? Agnes. Probably not. Agnes has a very good relationship with me. Charlene shook her hand and her face changed slightly. The target of the assassination this time was actually very close to Lady Agnes, one of the 4 pillars of God. Could it be that this assassination was not just about apostasy, but also involved a power struggle within the Eternal Freedom Sect? If she had known this, she would not have accepted the task of assassinating Ron. The internal strife among the four pillars of divine envoys was not something she, as an apostle, could intervene in. Disturbed, Charlene habitually brought the coffee to her lips. She had to complain that even the seemingly omnipotent prophet had some things that he was not good at. The coffee was brewed very poorly, and there were even lumps that didn't spread out. Taking small sips, she drank up all the coffee in 2 gulps. Charlene was not worried that Ron would poison the coffee. After all, for this being who controls everything, there was no need to poison the coffee. He could kill her at any time by just placing some experts in the room. He kept his own life probably just to get some information from her. Charlene thought so. Then, a strong wave of tiredness swept over her, and Charlene felt that her eyelids were extremely heavy, and she might close them at any time. She raised her head suddenly, her voice filled with incredible surprise. You put drugs in the coffee. You are a prophet. I believe in you so much. The bitterness of the coffee masked the taste of the potion. As soon as he raised his head, his chestnut eyes met Ron's shining silver eyes. Mental interference. Charlene's head was filled with confusion, and the strong urge to fall asleep continued to torture Charlene's will. The most ironic thing is that when she drank the coffee, she was still thinking that Ron would never poison her. For killers of Charlene's level, their will is very firm, and they can easily break away from the ordinary sleeping potion. However, just when Charlene subconsciously raised her head because she realized that she was being drugged, she happened to face him, caught Ron's eyes. Mental interference made Charlene's thinking begin to slow down. Although it was only a few seconds, it was enough for the effect of the sleeping potion to spread in Charlene's body. When the effect of the mental interference disappeared, Charlene's eyes completely drooped, and her body that had just stood up a little fell crookedly to the side, lying on the bed. Honestly, it's a bit of a bad posture. Using magic potions is indeed a despicable and shameless method. However, Ron has never been someone who cares about these details. No matter how despicable or shameless, the final winner is the one who can accomplish his goal. He casually threw the 2 glass bottles in his pocket into the trash can. These 2 bottles of sleeping potion came from Don Farouk, the same idiot who had just crossed over to this world and attacked him from behind, trying to defeat him. Found in the storage ring. As a member of the Eternal Freedom sect, Don Farouk's storage ring contains many similar things. They seem to often use this kind of thing to prey on women. They are really a bunch of shameless people. Ron complained in his heart, and his eyes fell on Charlene again. Looking at the buttocks that were raised because she was lying on the bed and wrapped in a tight leather jacket, Ron waved and slapped her. I won half, I won half, I won half. A layer of waves. Are you an idiot trying to kill me? Fortunately, it was this idiot who came this time. If it were any other apostle, it would not be so easy to deal with. Ron whispered in his heart while taking out a scroll from the storage ring. This scroll is somewhat different from ordinary brown magic scrolls. It is entirely silver white, but has some red traces all over it, like chains. This is one of the rewards Ron just received from 10 consecutive draws, a high-level contract document. Spread the contract documents and place them in front of Charlene. Then he grabbed Charlene's right hand, took off the gauze glove, took out a knife, and cut Charlene's palm. After smearing it casually, red blood stains were already spread all over the palm of my hand. Ron blinked and asked the ghost assassin Miss Charlene for her opinion. Miss Charlene, are you willing to sign this contract? Not talking. Then I'll take it as your acquiescence. Immediately, he took Charlene's right hand and pressed it heavily on the contract document. As a bloody handprint appeared, the scarlet light on the document suddenly glowed. The red chains seemed to come alive, like venomous snakes, constantly twisting around the high-level contract document, and eventually spread to Charlene next to her. Tangled hard and squirmed slowly. His slim and slender body had sunken marks all over his body. Like a chain made of solidified blood, it was sinking into Charlene's body little by little, until finally, it disappeared completely. There was only a scarlet collar on the slender neck. The collar was engraved with dense and complicated runes, and half of the chain hung down from Charlene's chest. The contract has been made, and those who violate it will suffer the pain of ecstasy. Beep. The system prompts, congratulations to the host for successfully surviving the assassination of the Eternal Freedom sect, and receiving the mission reward, increased spirit by 300, and increased strength by 300. The voice echoed in Ron's ears, and then, with a pop, a cluster of flames burst out from the high-level contract documents, and the scroll turned into a handful of ashes. This is a permanent contract. In addition to recharging money in the game, there are Krypton Gold exclusive props that cannot be obtained through other channels. After all, many players can make various mistakes even if they watch the game and the guide at the same time. Therefore, the game company has specially prepared a special benefit for these players. Just 1/648 can get 10 lottery opportunities, and in each lottery, there is a super high probability of 1% to obtain high-level contract documents. It is very overbearing, and once it is signed, it cannot be removed for life. As for the effect, it is equivalent to a high-intensity slave contract, completely unilateral. As long as you can stun the person you like and stamp your fingerprint on the contract document, then congratulations, she is yours. Although this thing is despised by many technology tycoons, it is very popular among the Kryptonian community. From now on, Charlene, the Ghost Assassin, the 9th seed of the 13 Apostles of the Eternal Freedom Sect, a heroic master, will become a sharp sword in his hand. And this sword will soon have a chance to show off its edge. Ron smiled slightly and threw a healing spell on Charlene. He finally learned this priest's signature skill while on the soul-crossing boat. After all, Charlene will be used by him from now on, so she naturally needs to take better care of her. Beep. The system prompts, congratulations to the host for successfully killing the Ginny Secret Guard 1, and receiving the reward of 10 consecutive lottery tickets won in advance. Beep. The system prompts, congratulations to the host for successfully killing the Ginny Secret Guard 1, and receiving the reward of 10 consecutive lottery tickets won in advance. Beep. The system prompts, congratulations to the host for successfully killing the Ginny Secret Guard 1, and receiving the reward of 10 consecutive lottery tickets won in advance. At this moment, 3 system prompts sounded one after another. The smile on Ron's face became even brighter. It seemed that the seeds he had cast before had begun to grow and sprout. At this moment, the group of killers arranged by the Spang theocracy are no longer killers, but prey in the eyes of the second-generation nobles who are trying to gain merit. Compared with the older generation of nobles, although these second generation are arrogant and domineering, they have not completely lost their spirit. Maybe the strength of these second generation nobles is not that great, but the bodyguards around them are all experts who have been killed for a long time. Everything is developing according to plan. Ron stuffed a small bottle in front of Charlene's nostrils. As the strong pungent smell entered Charlene's nasal cavity, the killer's nose twitched slightly, his brows furrowed twice, and he finally woke up from his drowsiness. She seemed a little confused. As chaotic memories poured into her mind, the expression on Charlene's face began to become more and more angry. When she saw the scarlet color on the bed, the woman's body shivered and she completely come to your senses. Her eyes widened and she pointed at Ron with a trembling finger. You are shameless. You actually drugged me, you actually did such a shameless thing to me while I was sleeping. Oh, God, who are the believers of the Eternal Freedom Sect? Why can a dignified prophet be so despicable? Is this still a prophet? With grief and anger in her heart, Charlene's little face turned red. She was not a very smart person, and she lost her ability to think at this moment. She screamed and rushed towards Ron with her slender body. The sharp dagger tore out a dazzling light in midair. Seeing the cold light approaching, Ron's expression remained unchanged, and he just stared at the crazy woman in front of him with a playful expression. Sure enough, just as Charlene took a step towards Ron, before her little feet even had time to land, scarlet chains suddenly appeared on Charlene's slender body, crisscrossing and connecting into a standard tortoise-shell pattern. Ron's mouth trembled slightly. He didn't understand why the pattern formed by the chains was so bad. Speaking of which, this female killer's figure was really bad. Charlene's face changed slightly. She didn't know what happened to these chains. Just when she tried to break free, the chains suddenly tightened. The next moment was Charlene's painful scream. His body seemed to be entangled by a giant python, and the ever-tightening chains were almost tearing his skin, and even his bones seemed to be breaking inch by inch. It was pain that seeped into the bone marrow. Not only that, the 2 chains even penetrated into her soul silently, as if they had opened their sharpest fangs, tearing and biting her soul. Plop! The body that had just stood up immediately fell to the ground, twisting violently, twitching, and struggling. There were dense beads of sweat on his forehead, small face, and neck. Seeing that it was almost done, Ron snapped his fingers. Immediately, I saw the chains on Charon's body disappearing silently, leaving only Charon lying on the ground panting violently. Even when she was lying on the ground, her chest was not deformed at all. The little face was pale, and there was uncontrollable fear in his eyes. For a short period of time, it felt like hell. I don't know how much time passed, but Charlene finally recovered a little. She struggled to get up from the ground, her legs still shaking uncontrollably. My whole body was soaked, and the inside of my tights was sticky. A pair of eyes filled with intense fear stared at Ron. What did you do to me? It's nothing, I just signed a contract document when you were asleep and on your own free will. Ron nodded vigorously. Well, yes, you did it voluntarily. I asked you, you didn't refuse, eh? I volunteered to be a ghost, you said I fell asleep. Charlene was so angry that her lips trembled. Why do I always feel that the man in front of me is more like a cultist than a member of the Eternal Freedom sect? Charlene kept taking deep breaths, trying her best to suppress the urge deep in her heart to attack Ron. She really didn't want to bear the experience just now. She could feel that the mysterious scarlet chain had not really disappeared. They are entrenched around the heart, turning into a cage to wrap around the heart. If she tried to attack Ron, or disobeyed Ron's orders, the chains would emerge, causing her hellish pain. If she was really about to kill Ron, these chains would instantly break her heart. This is something worse than a slave indenture. Charlene was very unwilling. No normal person would want to have such terrible shackles on themselves. But no matter how unwilling she was, Charlene had to accept her current situation. Looking at Charlene's face, Ron knew that the ghost assassin lady had understood her fate. He stretched out his arms and relaxed his somewhat stiff body. It seems that you have understood your current situation. Of course, you don't have to feel sad. Maybe after some time, you might want to thank me. After all, I saved your life. Seeing that Charlene still looked a little unconvinced, Ron didn't care. As for now, I will give you the first task of my master. Master's mission. Charlene's expression changed slightly. She subconsciously covered her chest with both hands and looked at the owner opposite with a horrified face. She had seen a lot of women in the Eternal Freedom sect, those women who were ordered by their so-called masters to do such and such things. The picture was really very bad. This fool, what does he want to do? At this moment, Ron's eyes suddenly turned sharp. His eyes flicked toward the window, and he felt a strange and twisted gaze. Just opposite, a figure flashed past the window of another building. Although it was only a short moment, Ron still saw it. It was an old man with white beard and hair. Ron stared out the window for a while, then looked back and fell on Charlene again. Charlene's movement of folding her arms and her wary eyes made Ron feel a little strange. This is not the reaction that members of the Eternal Free sect should have. If he is really a member of the Eternal Freedom sect, at this time, he should not take off his tight clothes neatly, and then use the most advanced technology in the Twilight Continent at his disposal to please his master in every possible way. Talent right. Although, in Ron's eyes, the tight leather jacket was the highlight. Although, Ron doesn't have this idea yet, it's not the right time. You are a believer in the Eternal Freedom sect. Do you still care about this? Ron asked the question in his heart. In the game, he did not conquer the 7 women among the 13 apostles, and his understanding of the apostles was limited to the CGs and text descriptions released by other players on the forum. He suddenly remembered that although CGs of the other 6 apostles were often released on the forum, the comments given by players were all enthusiastic. However, it seems that I have never seen Charlene before. Among the 13 apostles, the girl in front of her, whose IQ is not very high, seems to be an alternative among the alternative. Of course, Charlene raised her head proudly. I am an apostle. So, what then? Facing Ron's questioning, Charlene suddenly became a little ashamed, her little head hung down, and her left and right index fingers kept circling. In the Eternal Freedom sect, the apostles are different from the ordinary believers below. Apostles never participate in those low-level, animal-like parties. What the apostles pursue is not only physical pleasure, but also spiritual collision. In the sect, the 13 apostles are paired in pairs. Except for the occasional request to serve by the divine messengers, they are basically in a normal relationship between husband and wife. Even if there is a banquet like that, the only people who can participate are the divine messengers and other apostles. 2 pairs are paired, and Charlene is the one left. You've never been chosen by anyone. Ron raised his eyebrows. Charlene was even more ashamed. After a long time, she replied in a voice like a mosquito's hum, "Ha, they think I'm stupid." Ron's lips trembled. I'm afraid it's not because she dislikes Charlene for being stupid. The most important reason is Charlene's terrifying talent. It is easy to kill someone within a range of 1.5 meters. Unless magic intervention is done in advance, even a legendary master will be dead or seriously injured. This is very scary. Based on Ron's understanding of the divine envoys and apostles of the Eternal Freedom Sect, they are extremely cautious in character. Even if they are prepared for magical intervention, they will never allow threats like Charlene to approach him. Then, the ghost assassin in front of him suddenly pursed his lips. Besides, the other 6 female apostles are all more beautiful than me. This is the truth. According to the CG released, each of these apostles is a kind of demon and charming to the core. Perhaps their figures and looks are not the best, but they are definitely the ones that can arouse the most excitement in men. Compared with those apostles, Charlene, who is a bit silly, is indeed not very competitive, so it is normal for her to be left behind. Ron exhaled slightly. Don't worry, you are not stupid, you are smart. Charlene raised her head suddenly, and her originally depressed expression suddenly brightened. Really? Of course, I am a prophet and I don't lie to others. Ron said sternly. It won't be long before you find out how smart it is for you to voluntarily sign a contract with me. Charlene grinned. She didn't sign voluntarily. But Charlene was still a little happy. After all, this was the first time since she was a child that someone said she wasn't stupid. Even her parents often heard that she was stupid to death. Seeing Charlene's appearance, Ron felt a rare sense of guilt deep in his heart. He rubbed his forehead and suppressed the strange thoughts in his heart. Ahem, okay, Miss Charlene, stay lurking, pay strict attention to the surroundings, and notify me at any time if anyone approaches. Charlene let out a breath. She wanted to refuse and didn't want to obey Ron's orders so quickly. However, the scarlet chains looming on her skin and were about to emerge made Charlene understand what would happen if she didn't obey. Right in front of Ron, Charlene's figure gradually became transparent, and then she could no longer be seen. To be fair, not counting her slightly lacking IQ, Charlene is really excellent from the perspective of an assassin. Ron glanced out the window again. His vision was very good. Even with the curtains blocking him, he could still vaguely see several figures in the building opposite. The sun has set, and clouds cover the sky. The dancing candlelight reflected on the curtains, swaying in the wind, and it seemed that some kind of mysterious party was being held opposite. After this awakening, various strange events around him increased significantly. This is not a good sign. After a long time, Ron withdrew his gaze and sat quietly at the desk again. For him, the most important thing now was to deal with the killers sent by Spang Theocracy and Apu. In the slightly longer future, he still had many things to arrange. He picked up a pen and quickly wrote on a piece of white paper. Dear Brother Virgil, when you read this letter, I may be dead. I just want to ask you one thing. After I die, please immediately. A. City Lord's Mansion. The Marquis of York's study. This is a tall, middle-aged man with a gentle appearance. His slightly protruding belly proves that his figure has begun to get out of shape. Looking at his heroic daughter in armor, the Marquis of York felt a little lonely. This feeling was something I had never experienced even when my daughter got married. But this time, the Marquis of York understood that his precious daughter might really be abducted. The Marquis of York has already investigated the identity of the other party. Ron Copperfield, the eldest son of the Copperfield family of the Spang Theocracy, a scholar of ancient writing, an apostate of the Eternal Freedom Sect, a senior priest of the Church of the Dawn Goddess, a good brother of Virgil, a blasphemer of the great Saint Christian, a prophet, and a lover of wives. He wears many hats, but all in all, he is a very complex guy. He killed Herman, the only son of Archdeacon AP. This will definitely cause him some trouble. The Marquis of York did not want his family to be involved in a conflict of this level. Although the Marquis was noble, he was still vulnerable to such a behemoth. However, he also understood that this was also an opportunity for the York family. If you bet correctly, your fortune will skyrocket. If we could leave a prophet's bloodline to the York family. The middle-aged man's eyes began to brighten. After a few seconds, the excitement and madness in the Marquis of York's eyes gradually disappeared. He opened the drawer, took out a few plastic sealed papers from it, and handed it to Serafina. The Marquis of York looked pained. 3 Archibald's notes, 1 Partridge's note. Oh, my dearest daughter, you know your father, I want to collect these things, how much energy and wealth have been spent. In front of her father, Serafina also rarely showed a little bit of playfulness. She took the note and saluted her father. Thank you. The Marquis of York's eyes suddenly widened. Oh, listen, what is this called? Thanks. With 2 words, he defrauded him of the treasure he had worked so hard to collect for most of his life. Seeing Serafina turning around and leaving gracefully, the Marquis of York shouted loudly from behind, at this time next year, I will hold my grandson. Did you hear it? It's my grandson. And, your first son must be named York. Do you understand? Serafina puffed her cheeks. A small hand quietly placed on her lower abdomen. This kind of thing was not something she could decide. Although everything that should have happened and what shouldn't have happened has happened, no one knows whether she will be able to conceive a child. Serafina returned to her room. She took off her armor, and her slender and fit body was reflected in the floor-to-ceiling mirror. She took out a light blue skirt with lace from the wardrobe, and Serafina gestured on it. She originally didn't like this kind of light clothes. For female knights, skirts could not provide as strong a defense as armor. But, no matter what, Serafina is also a woman, and she also wants her lover to see her better side. The bed was piled with dresses Serafina tried on, and she finally chose the first one. After a brief hesitation, Serafina took out a pair of black stockings from the bottom of the closet. Aurelia once said that her lover is a perverted stocking addict, and his favorite thing is to tear up good stockings. Serafina couldn't understand this twisted hobby. However, as long as her lover likes it, she will do her best to satisfy it. Even the metal boots on her feet were replaced by a pair of crystal high heels by Serafina. After doing this, Serafina picked up the 4 notes on the coffee table again and prepared to go find Ron. Serafina has never been interested in these ancient documents, especially those written in ancient characters. The dense text will always make Serafina's head big. But this time, I don't know what happened, but by some strange coincidence, Serafina's eyes fell on the note. Perhaps, she just wanted to know what Ron was interested in, hoping that she and Ron could have more in common. But the moment Serafina's eyes fell on the note, her body suddenly stiffened. The words in the notes all seemed to come alive at this moment, and the strange symbols twisted and squirmed in Serafina's eyes. The next moment, Serafina's body trembled suddenly, her hand loosened, and all 4 notes fell to the ground. She covered her head with both hands, and her beautiful face was twisted to the extreme in an instant, like a ferocious demon. Elusive and noisy, indescribable and crazy murmurs penetrated through the ears and into the mind. Serafina pressed her ears hard, trying to stop the murmurs from infiltrating, but it had no effect. The illusory murmurs echoed directly in her mind. It was as if a sharp-edged steel cone was embedded in my mind. Spin and scratch. Dense beads of sweat appeared on his forehead, and blue veins popped out. The indescribable severe pain made her unable to stand firm, and she stumbled onto the bed, sometimes tense and sometimes limp. Her tall body tossed and turned on the bed, her amethyst-like eyes full of pain. In the depths of those eyes, countless words are still squirming. These strange words that Serafina could not understand were gradually distorted, as if hazy lights and shadows overlapped together, as if to construct a strange painting. Serafina's body was still twitching, but her eyes were wide open. The picture peeking in front of me became more and more clear. There is the church. It's the moral cathedral. The church that was originally simple and full of sacred atmosphere has completely changed into something else. Desolate, decayed, and filled with the smell of decay. There seemed to be a layer of light red mist floating in the air, like blood mist, covering the entire world. The statue of the dawn goddess collapsed on the ground and was in pieces. The church was so quiet that it was eerie. The scene that Serafina spied in front of her eyes was moving at a slow speed. Finally, she saw a figure. It was a nun. She fell to the ground, her body surrounded by scarlet blood. Her chest was cut open and her heart was missing. No, not a nun. As the scroll gradually unfolded in front of her, more and more corpses appeared in front of Serafina. Nuns, priests, and priests were all lying quietly on the ground, as if they were asleep, with thick blood covering the ground. Crunch, crunch, click, click. The weird chewing sound replaced the mumbling, echoing in Serafina's mind. She couldn't help but have a dense layer of pimples all over her body. She saw Aurelia's figure, leaning against a pillar, breathing heavily, her amber eyes filled with deep sorrow and despair. Her eyes were getting redder and redder, like blood. She saw Cecilia's figure next to a mutilated statue. She seemed to have just escaped from the sea of AA blood, and her whole body was bathed in rich scarlet. Her body was trembling, her mouth opened wide, and she seemed to be screaming something, but her voice could not be heard clearly. She saw that Virgil's body fell to the side, and his slightly rising chest seemed to prove that he was not dead yet. However, there was a huge crack between the chest and abdomen, and the sticky internal organs were almost spread out. She saw it and saw a female knight covered in blood. That's herself. The purple gem's eyes were dull, like a doll that had lost its vitality. She saw Ron. His body stood in the middle of the church, and a skinny claw penetrated his chest from behind and took out his heart. No, Serafina finally couldn't bear it anymore and let out a sharp cry. She sat up from the bed with a cry, panting heavily, and her body was soaked with sweat. His widened eyes were filled with unbreakable fear, and his body couldn't stop shaking at all. I don't know how much time passed, but Serafina's body finally slowly returned to calm. She slowly left the bed, squatted down, and picked up the pages of notes again. The scene just now was so clear, as if it was really happening in front of you. It was so real that Serafina despaired. In a daze, she could still smell the rich blood. His eyes were silently staring at the page of notes in his hand, which was Archibald's notes. However, when he saw this page of notes again, that weird scene never appeared again. Ron will have his heart removed at Morrow Church. When she saw Archibald's notes, she briefly saw the future. Serafina clutched the note tightly, stood up suddenly, and walked out of the house. She could not allow this scene to happen, never. As soon as he opened the door, he saw an old man standing outside the door. That's the old butler of the York family. He raised one hand as if he was about to knock on the door. Seeing Serafina suddenly appearing at the door, the old housekeeper was stunned for a moment, and then stood up straight. Miss, what happened to you just now? I think I heard you scream. Ah, I'm sorry, I saw a cockroach. Serafina forced a smile on her pale face. You know, I am most afraid of things like this crawling around. This is really bad. I will tell the maid to tidy up your room again, the old housekeeper said immediately. Nodding, Serafina walked towards the outside of the mansion. After taking just 2 steps, Serafina suddenly stopped again. She looked at the old housekeeper with some suspicion and hesitation. Uncle Anthony, what do you mean? Is it possible that Archibald is still alive? The old housekeeper didn't seem to expect that the eldest lady would suddenly ask such a question, and his face was full of astonishment. After a brief hesitation, he gave the answer. That person is, after all, a blasphemer more powerful than a sage. No matter what, not surprisingly. That's it. Serafina raised her head and glanced at the night sky. The clouds blocked the sky and there was no moonlight. Withdrawing his gaze, Serafina's figure quickly disappeared into the night. The Sykes Hotel. This was originally a gun cellar. But now, it has become a hunting ground. The entire hotel seemed to be shrouded in a light layer of scarlet, and the screams from time to time were even more terrifying. A young man wearing businessman's clothing was walking quickly through the garden in the backyard of the Sykes Hotel. His face was very gloomy. He is a clad secret guard of the Spang theocracy. Of course, his apparent identity is that of a businessman walking between the kingdom of Granville and the theocracy of Spang. Everything was going smoothly at first. There were also many nobles from out of town living in the Sykes Hotel. It was said that they were all here for a purple weapon that would be strengthened and increased by 10 at the auction the day after tomorrow. Granville people, they are so rich, they are actually willing to spend a lot of strengthening stones to strengthen a purple weapon to +10. This kind of behavior would definitely be called a prodigal in the Spang theocracy. These nobles were arrogant and difficult to get along with, but under their deliberate tolerance, no irreconcilable conflicts occurred. It was all normal at first, but as soon as night fell, these nobles suddenly turned into a group of lunatics, hunting people from the Spang theocracy everywhere, and turned the largest hotel in Larnaca City into a mass grave. In order to avoid being too conspicuous together, they originally lived on different floors and in different rooms and waited until late at night to gather for action. As a result, they now had to hide here and there, like mice being targeted by night owls. Thinking of those gazes, the guard in brocade clothes was horrified. The gaze was even crazier than that of a strong man who had been in prison for 10 years and was extremely energetic when he suddenly saw a beautiful girl taking off her clothes. Pooh, he spat, stretched out his hands to push aside the leaves in front of him, and peered ahead. It was quiet in front of him, and he breathed a sigh of relief. Just as he was about to leave the flower bed, a heartbreaking pain suddenly came. Looking down, he saw a gun head covered in blood in front of his chest. His heart was drilled through. Poof! The spear was retracted, and the unsupported body fell to the ground. After several struggles, there was no movement. A slender and handsome young man walked out of the shadows behind him, took off the corpse's storage ring, and quickly found a token of a brocade-clad secret guard. Bah! Those barbaric idiots from Spang theocracy actually dare to go to the kingdom of Granville to cause trouble. If not, who will you kill? These idiots probably don't know yet, but their heads have already been opened. A mysterious person has issued a bounty. Whoever can get the most Spang theocracy spies tokens will receive a bounty of up to 10,000 gold coins. 10,000 gold coins doesn't matter. As the Earl's son, he didn't care about the money. What he wants is the honor of being the spy killer. That was enough to make him hold his head high in the aristocratic circle. No one would dare to call him a sissy anymore, and Mrs. Bonnard would definitely look at him differently. On the top floor of the hotel, Dolores quietly stared at the scene below. Perhaps the nobles of the kingdom are not so hopeless. At least the younger generation has not been completely corrupted. This is something to be thankful for, right? Dolores said quietly. Right next to her, a female warrior wearing armor and a silver mask covering her face appeared quietly. The mask was engraved with a sky full of stars. He said he didn't want you to take action. The female warrior finally spoke slowly, her voice slightly hoarse. I didn't take action. I stayed in the room quietly and didn't do anything. Dolores looked innocent. After a brief pause, a slightly obsessed smile appeared on the face of Princess Dolores again. Haha, that is the husband that I, Dolores, have chosen. The smile on his face gradually changed, becoming cold and bloody. If you dare to touch my husband, I want to see how many lives they have. A few more seconds passed, and Dolores asked again, is there anything going on at the palace? According to the information from Liv, the 7th Princess Agnes, who has been detained in the Cold Palace and under heavy guard, has left the Cold Palace in the past few days, or even left the palace directly, and her whereabouts are unknown. It doesn't matter. Dolores shook her head. She can do whatever she wants, as long as she doesn't get involved with my man. And, the female warrior seemed to hesitate briefly, but finally spoke. After we informed Liv of the clues provided by Ron, Liv had already found a way to spy on the secrets of the back mountain and the dungeon. The ability of the Whisperer is very useful at times like this. No matter how tight the blockade is, you won't care about a mouse or cockroach crawling on the ground. Dolores's eyes narrowed slightly. How? The back mountain is full of bones. The dungeon is a corpse bound by chains, and a rotten, blood book. Dolores's throat squirmed slightly, and she spoke again in a slightly trembling voice. What is written in the blood book? The blood book has decayed, and most of the handwriting cannot be read. I can only make out a few words, which are written. Dolores. Run. Aurelia, remember my words, no matter what happens, please don't despair, believe that hope will always exist, you know, I will always love you. After writing the last sentence on the paper, Ron exhaled slightly and put the paper away, which was left for Aurelia. This feeling is very bad. He can probably understand why the Riddler exists in this world. Sometimes, you can't reveal certain contents too directly, otherwise, it will be easy to be confused by some special beings. From a glimpse, you can only use ambiguous expressions, and hope that the other party will understand what you want to express. He's really become a little sentimental. Ron laughed and shook his head. The expression on his face was a little lonely, but it was quickly cleared away, and he became full of energy. Finger caressing the ring representing the soul-crossing boat, he was perfecting the plan in his mind, and he did not allow any mistakes in this plan. His eyes drifted out of the window, and there seemed to be an eye silently watching him in the gloomy sky. He knew what that meant. The high-level contract documents have always maintained a subtle connection between Ron and Charlene. Charlene can ignore the space and inform Ron of the information she spies at any time, and Ron can also issue different instructions in time. For example, interfering with a certain target for 40 seconds was a very subtle operation. Ron felt like he was almost approaching a micro-manipulation master. The corridor outside the door is quiet and deep. The dim corridor light drew a long figure on the ground, and Melville was walking alone in the corridor. Melville kept cursing, and it was obvious that he was not in a happy mood. Ever since Ron woke up, he hadn't been happy for a second. First, he was sent to "get out" words by two women, then he was provoked by Ron in person, and he was also sent another "get out" word by Ron. God knows what Melville was feeling at that moment. He wanted to crush the face that was so close to him, break his fingers one by one, and break his bones piece by piece. However, no matter how crazy Melville's mood was, he could only endure it. He couldn't kill Ron in public. One of his teeth was chipped and his gums were bleeding. I thought that as long as tonight passed, Ron would become a corpse. Of course, it is broken. He will not let Ron die so happily. He will try every means and use every means to make this man understand what hell is. But, the plan changed again. The 13 secret guards in brocade robes and the 3 executioners have all become prey and are being hunted by the crazy nobles. He went to find Lydia and was informed by the 3rd princess that there had been an unexpected interference and the plan to hunt Ron was cancelled. He tried to contact and even win over Ron. Are you kidding me? He has endured it for so long, just waiting for the last enjoyment, and told himself that the plan was cancelled. Are you even trying to win over Ron? How could he accept such an ending? At that moment, the depression that had been accumulating in Melville's heart exploded. He hates Ron, always. He didn't understand that he was obviously the legitimate son, and he was the one who would inherit the position of head of the family in the future. Ron is just a fool born from a maid, so why is this fool so valued by so many people? He has shown quite astonishing talents at a very young age, and his future prospects are limitless. Why, when the president of the Spang Theocracia's Magic Association personally visited the Copperfield family, did he disdain his friendship? After a quick glance, he didn't even look at him. He just held a pile of tattered books and asked to find Ron by name. Why was Ron personally invited by the Saint of the Heart of Nature Church to enter the library of the Heart of Nature Church? That was a place that even he was not qualified to be invited to. And when he showed off his newly learned knowledge in front of the saint, when he hoped to get praise from the saint about his martial arts skills, he only received a perfunctory saying, "Ah, very good." Then Her Highness the Saint turned around and continued to discuss the rotten scroll with Ron. Even after Ron ran away from home, important people continued to visit the Copperfield family. After learning that Ron had left, they all showed a disappointed expression on their faces, and faced with the invitation from him, the future head of the family, not even willing to give him the face to sit down and have a cup of tea. Why? Doesn't he just know a few crooked people who have been eliminated long ago? Why, in the eyes of all the big shots, only that idiot, but not his legitimate son, as if Ron was the real hope of the Copperfield family. It has been like this since he was a child, like a nightmare that has been tormenting Melville. But now, this nightmare is coming to an end. Just kill that fool and no one will remember Ron's name anymore. Melville grinned and looked towards the door not far ahead. I originally thought that sneaking into the branch of the Church of the Dawn Goddess was a bit risky, but I didn't expect that this guy actually came to my door. This is truly a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Ron always felt that he was just an insignificant scholar in the ancient writing research circle. He buried his head in ancient books all day long and didn't know what his status was in this circle. It was clear that a fatal danger was coming, but there was no trace of nervousness on Ron's face. He even made himself a cup of coffee and sat leisurely on a chair. Through Charlene, he could perfectly control all the surrounding intelligence. Such chaotic movements here did not attract the city guards. Perhaps, Dolores has already made arrangements. This stage will not be disturbed by anyone tonight. He didn't seem to notice at all that a transparent shadow had appeared outside the open window. Judge of Hell, Issa. The senior inquisitor of the Heretic Inquisition of the Church of the Dawn Goddess. The word, hell, refers to the apostates and heretics who fall into his hands and will suffer torture comparable to hell. He is also one of the 12 loyal lackeys under Apollon Montgomery. Oh no, there are only 11 left now. The last lackey, Alec, has died in Virgil and Seraphina's death. Under the sneak attack of justice. Of course, even if they are all lackeys, he is still the better one. His strength is definitely not comparable to that of trash like Alec. He can fight 5 of those trash. His sinister eyes stared at the figure beside the desk. He was in no hurry to do it. Although he looked down on Alec, Alec's death still proved that Ron was not that easy to deal with. There was no other hidden aura or hidden magic trap in the room, as if Ron was the only one. No matter how you look at it, this is an excellent opportunity to kill Ron. After repeated confirmations, Issa finally raised his right hand. With one move, he can destroy the useless person in front of him who has not even reached the point of panic. At this moment, Ron suddenly put down the coffee cup in his hand. Hello, Judge Issa. Another mental interference. Although the mental interference used through sound is not as strong as the effect of looking directly into the eyes, it can still have a pretty good effect when caught off guard. Outside the window, Issa's body trembled suddenly, and the magic power he just lifted was instantly confused. There was even a cramping pain in my heart. His eyes widened instantly. Did this guy Ron already know that he would come? Did he even see through what he was hiding? This is impossible. What he used was the most advanced magic scroll of invisibility, which was made by Vice Pope Apu himself. How could Ron, a mere transcendent who had never even reached the panic level, see through the methods of Vice Pope Apu? Of course, Vice Pope Apu is indeed very powerful, but in the field of hiding, he cannot compare to a professional assassin like Charlene. However, Issa didn't know this. He only felt horrified. When he thought about the legend about Ron, this guy was a prophet. Although Issa had never believed in the so-called prophet, at this time, he felt inexplicably. His scalp was numb, and he always had the fear that everything he did would be seen through. Now that the other party has discovered him, there is no point in continuing to hide him. The concealment technique slowly disappears. That's a man. At 60 or 70 years old, although his beard and hair are all white, his energy is bright, his fair face shows no signs of aging, and his body wearing a dark red clergyman's robe has no rickets at all. Suppressing the restlessness in his chest, Issa spoke slowly. He was obviously an old man, but his voice was as childish as a child. You know me. Did you know I was coming? As he spoke, Issa still looked around with vigilant eyes, and her reaction was the same as Charlene before. It seems that this old man is not much smarter than Charlene. Of course, the prophet knows everything. Ron replied with a slight smile. You killed the Vice Pope's son, you won't survive. Issa swallowed a mouthful of saliva and said in a deep voice. Your Excellency, Judge of Hell, you should first think about whether you can survive. Ron said. As he spoke, Ron looked towards the door. The door that was originally closed suddenly opened on its own with a creak. A heavily armed knight suddenly appeared at the door. Who could he be if he wasn't Melville? Seeing Melville again, Ron's face did not have the disgust before, but was filled with joy. He even opened his arms as if to give Melville a warm hug, although the distance was too far. Oh, my dear brother, you finally came a younger brother. Issa's pupils shrank instantly. The two of them looked somewhat similar. A heroic knight, this was Ron's backup plan. You must not get entangled with this knight, and you must kill Ron before then. Almost at the same time, Melville was a little surprised. He did not feel that the relationship between himself and Ron was so close, but soon he noticed the cleric wearing a dark red robe behind Ron. The logo of the rising sun is enough to prove that this is a master of the Church of the Dawn Goddess. Ron is also a prophet recognized by the Church of the Dawn Goddess. This cleric is the backup man Ron plans to use against him. You must not get entangled with this cleric, and you must kill Ron before then. Strike first to gain the upper hand. Strike first to gain the upper hand. At this moment, the two beings who were trying to kill Ron reached an unprecedented spiritual resonance. Rain of divine light swords. Wild thrust. Rain of divine light swords. Wild thrust. Two roars sounded almost simultaneously. By the window, Issa opened his hands, and densely packed lightsabers fell towards Ron's position like raindrops. At the door, Melville's body turned into a stream of light, holding a spear, and stabbed directly in the narrow room that was not suitable for knights to fight. In an instant, the sharp gun tip was almost touching Ron's body. Just then, Ron snapped his fingers. Extreme dodge. The next moment, Ron's body suddenly twisted in an incredible way, retreating 2 meters in an extremely subtle arc, avoiding attacks from the left and right. The dense rain of divine light swords shrouded Melville. It seemed as if Melville took the initiative to bear the magic, and as if Issa's attack was prepared for Melville. When the head of the gun was filled with bright red light, and the divine light sword rain shattered one by one. Ron's position was not far from the window, and the spearhead that had just shattered the sword rain was pierced directly into Issa's chest. It seemed that that was his original target. Although Ron looked down on Melville, he had to admit that Melville was really very powerful. He is younger than Serafina, but stronger than Serafina. Of course, only he himself knows how much water Melville, the so-called once-in-a-century genius of the Copperfield family, has. As the only legitimate son of the family, Melville has had high hopes since he was a child. He is loved by the entire family and has never stopped using various magical medicines in practice. To put it bluntly, Melville has a large part in his strength. They were all caused by taking magic potions. However, whether it is Melville's own efforts or the magic potion, strength is strength. Issa's extremely powerful divine light sword rain was easily shattered. The sharp spearhead was wrapped in red flames and pushed directly into the chest of the Hell Judge, trying to kill the Hell Judge with one shot. Melville was completely convinced that if he didn't kill this cleric, he would have no chance of killing Ron. When I thought of this, the magic power in my body was mobilized again, and the red light above the gun head gradually evolved into a ferocious thing like a dragon's head. Faintly, you can even hear the roar of the fire dragon. Issa's face also changed drastically, and a ball of light suddenly burst out in his originally cloudy eyes. It seemed that it was absolutely impossible to kill Ron without killing this heroic knight. After all, this guy was Ron's biological brother, and there was no way he could just watch his brother being killed. It has to be said that Issa and Melville are a perfect match, and their spirits are highly compatible. Issa's lips moved quickly. For a powerful person like the Hell Judge, the magic spell didn't even need to be chanted. His hands quickly opened, and a dazzling light burst out from the front of his chest, condensing into a shining light shield. Boom-a-ay. The next moment, Melville's gun head exploded against the light shield. There was a violent impact, followed by a violent roar that dispersed instantly. The glass and windows in the room were shattered into pieces in an instant, the curtains were twisted into pieces, and the magic chandelier on the ceiling exploded. The surging energy surged through the room like a tsunami, and wherever it went, there were dense cracks on the solid walls. In the room, the temperature soared suddenly, and the space in front of me seemed to be inexplicably distorted. Melville's unreserved attack was too much for even the Inquisitor of Hell to withstand. The light shield cracked and his whole body was blown away. After flying for dozens of meters, he reluctantly stopped. His body hovered in midair, trembling suddenly, and a trace of bright red blood oozed from the corner of his mouth. Melville's palms were also numb and his mouth was cracked. Seeing Issa being knocked away, he didn't even take this opportunity to kill Ron. He seemed to be worried that when he turned around to kill Ron, he would be attacked by the cleric. He wanted to kill Ron, but between killing Ron and his own life, Melville undoubtedly valued the latter more. The worst thing is that Ron disappeared, and for a while, he couldn't be found. Melville could only focus on Issa. The sole of his foot stomped hard on the ground, and with a bang, the floor cracked instantly. Melville's body was ejected directly from the window, and the spear came out of his hand, like a meteor flying across the sky, towards the Inquisitor of Hell. Boom, boom, boom. This is a battle between magicians and knights. Brilliant magic and ferocious martial arts roared. Compared to the current conflict, the previous assassinations of the second-generation nobles against the imperial guards and executioners were nothing short of childish. The violent attacks even shook the building of the Sykes Hotel. The entire building was crumbling, as if it might collapse at any time. Many guests staying in the hotel could not bear this fear and fled from the guest room in panic, not even taking care of their luggage. The waiter also yawned and slowly put away the gold coins, silver coins and copper plates in the cabinet. Tuntun followed the flow of people and walked outside. Only Ron, after dispelling the invisibility spell that Charlene had cast on him, stayed in the room very quietly, completely ignoring the light flashing outside the window from time to time. He even prepared a cup of coffee for himself leisurely, and then slowly walked away. He walked to the window, glanced at the movement outside the window, and Ron opened his mouth, "Don't fight anymore." With only his own voice echoing in the empty room, Ron felt a little embarrassed without anyone to compliment him. He even pulled up a chair and sat at the window to talk. From the perspective of absolute strength and realm, it is obvious that Melville is slightly higher than Issa, really only a little bit, not too much, 1 star and 2 stars. However, in terms of actual combat experience, Issa far surpasses Melville. Melville is like a raging giant ape, causing smoke and dust wherever he goes. Issa is like an insidious snake, and a counterattack from time to time can pose a considerable threat to Melville. Charlene appeared quietly behind Ron. At any time, this woman was like a ghost walking in the darkness, never making any movement. The broken glass reflected Charlene's hot body under her tight leather jacket. Seeing the owner sitting peacefully at the window, Charlene felt an inexplicable fear in her heart. It was as if what sat there was not a person, but a cunning demon, toying with the fate of others. Obviously these two people came to kill him, but because of his simple plan and one sentence, he started fighting first, and they were still fighting to the death. Is this really a prophet, a follower of the goddess of dawn? Why does it feel like this guy is more like a descendant of the god of shadow and deception? Now, Charlene, who do you think can win between the two of them? Ron asked abruptly. Charlene silently turned her gaze to the two people who were fighting fiercely outside. Judge. In Charlene's view, this was normal. Although Melville showed greater strength, this fighting method caused extremely serious damage to magic power, and he could not last long. On the contrary, the judge, although he looks very embarrassed, consumes very little magic power, and the situation will be reversed in a short time. Let's make a bet. I bet Melville will win. Ron raised his eyebrows and said. Charlene rolled her eyes at Ron. He was a prophet. She was not stupid enough to bet with a prophet, but she couldn't help but ask, why? Because of the gun in Melville's hand. Ron drank the coffee in his hand and said quietly. That gun is not only a purple gold epic weapon, but also a holy relic. That is the heirloom weapon of the Copperfield family. When this gun appears in Melfield's hands, it basically means that the Copperfield family has recognized that this is the patriarch of the next generation of the family. As expected of his legitimate son, he is so loved. This gun is called Egg's Fang. The main forging material is the teeth of the 9-headed python Aeger. At the same time, a trace of the remaining soul of the 9-headed python Aeger is sealed in the gun body. Once the remnant soul is released, AIG's fangs will burst out with terrifying power, infinitely close to legendary weapons. Of course, this move also places a huge burden on itself. It seems that Melville won't be able to hold on for long. Laugh. Spears shot across the air. The red flame clearly divided the space in front of him into 2 layers, upper and lower. The extreme scorching heat caused the surrounding space to distort. The Hell Judge's body crackled and shattered like glass. Melville felt agitated, overstimulating his magic power, and Melville's face turned red. He could feel how serious the consumption in his body was. But what makes Melville even more irritated is that even though he has used everything he has learned throughout his life, he has not been able to cause too serious harm to the Inquisitor of Hell from beginning to end. This guy, who is not a magician, is simply a flea, jumping around. No matter how embarrassed he looks, he can escape within the slightest chance. It's really impossible to dodge, but you can still resist it with the Dawn Shield. On the contrary, because of several sneak attacks by the Hell Judge, the armor on his body was full of cracks. It can't go on like this. Seeing the body of the Inquisitor of Hell shattered like a mirror, Melville shook his spear, swung his carbine back, and stabbed behind him with the tip of the spear habitually. This kind of scene has appeared countless times, and Melville is used to it. But soon, Melville's expression changed slightly. The tip of the gun did not touch anything, and he did not notice the slightest fluctuation of magic power behind him. Before he could react, a figure suddenly appeared on the right side. It was none other than Issa, the judge of hell who had disappeared before. With a flick of his finger, the magic that had been prepared was instantly released, and a beam of light shot out at an extremely fast speed. With a pop, Melville's body trembled suddenly, and a small hole was penetrated in his waist. There were traces of burned flesh and blood near the hole. One waist was wasted. Melville's face instantly turned pale. And Issa will not waste even a second at this time. His hands have been opened, and his lips are moving quickly, which means that the next powerful magic is coming. Things are not going well. The injuries on his body were very serious. If he could not receive timely treatment, he might not be able to save his waist. Melville's heart skipped a beat. He turned the spear in his hand and shouted in a low voice, "Iger's fangs, free!" Booza! Red chains suddenly appeared from the spear. The next moment, there was a snap and all the chains shattered. Black phantoms of giant pythons suddenly appeared from the spears. They opened their bloody mouths and exposed their sharpest fangs. Like a black storm, it swept forward. Issa's expression changed drastically. He instinctively felt the danger, and the magic he was preparing stopped instantly, and he wanted to use the magic of mirror travel that he had used many times before to escape from here. But as soon as he opened his mouth, the narrow eyes of a giant python were already staring at him, and Issa's lips and neck instantly turned into pale stone. Petrochemical. The magic was forcibly interrupted. The next moment, the remaining 8 giant pythons wrapped themselves around and tightened immediately. Crunch, crunch, crunch. All of a sudden, a heart-wrenching sound was heard. An unknown number of bones were directly crushed by the giant python. The Hell Judge's body was distorted into shape, and blood clots with internal organs fragments were continuously sprayed out from his open mouth. The open mouth kept moving back and forth across the body of the Inquisitor of Hell, taking away a piece of bright red flesh with each pass. Not long after, the majestic Judge of Hell was devoured by 9 giant pythons. The 9 giant pythons returned, and the red chains appeared on the gun body again. In midair, there was a bloody wind. Melville's body finally landed on the ground. He gasped for breath and could feel the emptiness in his body. Freeing AIG's fangs consumed a lot of blood, making Melville's face extremely pale. But no matter what, this cleric, Ron's lackey, was finally killed. When he took a break, Ron would be the next to die. Beep. The system prompts, "Congratulations to the host for successfully surviving the Vice Pope's revenge and receiving the mission reward, free control attribute points plus 500. Ron finally stood up. "It's time for us to take the stage." He jumped up and jumped out of the window. Looking around, it was a mess. Criss-crossing ravines cover the ground. The walls of the hotel were full of cracks, and even worse, they collapsed. It was indeed a conflict between 2 heroic masters. Even if it was just the aftermath of the battle, the destructive power was exaggerated. Hearing the movement behind him, Melville turned around suddenly and stared at Ron, his scarlet eyes filled with intense hatred. Especially when he saw the ghost assassin Charlene behind Ron, his eyes narrowed even more, and a bad feeling emerged in his heart. Now, he no longer has the strength to deal with a heroic master. Compared with the distortion on Melville's face, Ron's expression looked particularly soft. He was smiling and even opened his arms. "Oh, Melville. I sincerely thank you for killing Judge Issa of Hell." What? Melville didn't react for a moment. He didn't understand why Ron wanted to thank him. Isn't this priest his bodyguard? He killed his bodyguard, and he actually thanked himself in return. Is there something wrong with this Guyah's brain? Ron looked surprised. Don't you know, I killed the only son of the Vice Pope of the Church of the Dawn Goddess, this Inquisitor of Hell, but the Vice Pope specially arranged to kill me." Melville's eyes suddenly widened. The next second, he felt a tightness in his chest, opened his mouth, and spurted out a mouthful of bright red blood. Melville was so angry that he vomited blood. Originally, because releasing AIG's fangs consumed a lot of blood, he was already in a state of anemia. This mouthful of blood spurted out, and Melville's face became paler. Coo, 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 coo. Weird sounds kept coming from his throat, and his pale lips were trembling. Pointing a finger at Ron, he seemed to want to say something, but nothing came out. This cleric was arranged by the vice pope of the Church of the Dawn Goddess to kill Ron. Then don't they have the same goal? So what was the purpose of fighting for such a long time, wasting a whole body, even spending blood to free AIG's fangs, and falling into extreme weakness? To eliminate a threat to Ron. When he thought of this, Melville could no longer hold back and spurted out another mouthful of blood. That look made Charlene feel a little pity. My master is really terrible. He is not a demon, he is the ancestor of demons. It was obvious that Melville was already in such a miserable condition, yet he deliberately told the truth in front of Melville, not only causing physical harm, but even destroying Melville from the soul. Killing people and killing people's hearts is nothing more than that. As for Ron, his face was full of relief. This feeling of playing with others was really exciting. Ron's eyes drifted to the sky involuntarily. Is that mysterious existence in the void also enjoying the pleasure of controlling the fate of others? Looking back, Ron took a deep breath and looked at the crazy Melville in front of him. He felt that he was really kind. Seeing that Melville was in such a miserable state, he quickly told him the truth to save him from having to die in vain. Isn't this kindness? There is no kinder being in this world than him. Melville was so moved that he howled like crazy. Staring into Ron's eyes, he was more vicious than a poisonous snake. I kill you. Melville was completely out of control. He didn't even care about his broken body or the almost exhausted magic power. He dragged his tired body and grabbed AIG's fangs in his hand, and rushed towards Ron. Under normal circumstances, Melville can really pose a big threat to Ron, but now. His right hand dropped, and the ironwood staff appeared in his palm. The moment the spear struck, Ron shifted his body and dodged easily. At the same time, his right hand swept towards Melville's lower body. Facing the staff that was thrown at him, Melville wanted to dodge, but his extremely exhausted body was completely out of control. He only heard a snap, and Melville's left knee was blown open. His body rolled around in midair, and it took a long time before he hit the ground heavily. Looking at the left leg, it was already twisted out of shape. Almost all the bones inside had been shattered. Some broken bones even penetrated his skin, making it bloody. Melville was like a humble worm, lying on the ground, squirming nervously, his eyes widened and his mouth wide, but for a while he couldn't even utter a scream. Several seconds passed before the extremely miserable screams penetrated the sky. It hurts so much. No matter how strong it was before, it will be useless once the magic power is used up. Seeing his brother in such miserable condition, Ron's eyes showed no mercy. Although he only inherited this body, the soul and will of the original owner had long since dissipated, but it was like a feeling imprinted in the body, and Ron hated this thing in front of him very much. Grasping the ironwood staff in his hand, Ron walked towards Melville step by step. His mood is a bit complicated. There is a question about whether to kill Melville or not. From Ron's perspective alone, he must be killed. He will not keep the threat forever. However, Dolores is also involved. Ron has just given guidance to Dolores as a master, and he hopes that Dolores can become the queen who dominates the world in the future. Now Dolores is at a stage where she has not yet started. If Melville is killed, it will just give the Spang theocracy an excuse to invade Granville, and Dolores's plan may also be affected. Of course, even if he didn't kill Melville, the Spang theocracy and the Heart of Nature Church would definitely try their best to find another excuse. Otherwise, let's just kill him. Melville also felt something. The screams suddenly stopped, leaving only the broken body trembling. He wanted to kill Ron, but when it was his turn, he finally felt the fear of death. Ron, you want to kill me. You can't kill me. If you kill me, the Spang theocracy will take the opportunity to start a war against Granville. At that time, the warriors of the Spang theocracy will bloodbath Granville. In the entire Granville, no life will be able to survive. Even if it's a dog. Melville roared with strength he didn't know where he came from. He's right. At this moment, a cold voice suddenly came from the side. You can't kill him. Ron turned around and saw two figures on the left. That's right, two people. A girl was wearing a black gothic dress, her long black hair was rippling in the night wind, and her scarlet eyes were shining with a strange light. The third princess of Spang theocracy, the witch, Lydia. She appeared a little late, and Ron thought she would have appeared earlier, for example, when Melville was fighting the Inquisitor of Hell. Perhaps, some unexpected situation interfered with her actions and prevented her from showing up in time, and this interference most likely came from Dolores. As for the other figure, it is also a woman. Compared with the petite Lydia next to her, this woman is taller and more mature. She is a noble, but she does not wear complicated ceremonial skirts like other nobles. Her upper body is just a short pair of lining that can cover her breasts, and her lower body is a pair of casual shorts that wrap around her hips. That was not a style of clothing found in Twilight Continent. He had obviously cut off his trouser legs, leaving his muscular waist and slender thighs exposed. If defense is not taken into account, this kind of outfit is more suitable for combat. With healthy wheat-colored skin and an angular face, she looks like a female leopard. Ron recognized the woman's identity and a hint of sarcasm curled up in his mouth. Seeing Melville's miserable appearance, the tall girl couldn't bear it in her eyes. She looked at Ron again. Ron, you can't kill Melville. He is your brother after all. Listen to my sister's advice. He is already in dire straits. Spare his life. That's right, this girl is the eldest sister of the original owner of the body, Vera Melville. A female warrior who is good at boxing and close combat. She can use magic power to strengthen her body, so that every fist she swings has the destructive power to cut gold, jade, and rocks. In my impression, this person does not exist in the investigation team of the Spang Theocracy in the game. Vera was not included in the information that Charlene had found out before. She must have just arrived, but she just doesn't know the purpose of Vera's appearance this time. Ron was whirling with thoughts in his mind, then scratched his hair and smiled, "Brother." His tone was contemptuous. Please, when he wanted to start a war between Spang Theocracy and Granville by killing me, did he ever think that I was his brother? Ron raised his eyebrows. Neither the current Ron nor the original owner of the body has any feelings for the Copperfield family. Not even a little bit. Vera's expression instantly turned gloomy. This was a question she couldn't answer at all. After a few seconds passed, Vera took a deep breath and said in a deep voice, "Ron, I know you hate the Copperfield family, but please believe that not every family member wants to sacrifice you to gain benefits for the family. I'm sorry, I found out about this news too late. When Saint Kaya informed me of the news, I immediately rushed from Spang Theocracy as quickly as possible, but in the end I still couldn't prevent this scene from happening. Saint Kaya, a saint from the Church of the Heart of Nature, seems to have a good relationship with the original owner of the body. This should be the impact that he had on the world after replacing the original owner of his body and successfully surviving. Originally, neither Saint Kaya nor Vera Copperfield participated in the conflict in Larnaca, Middle. Ron's eyes dropped. If you had appeared a few minutes earlier, I might have believed you. Vera was speechless for a moment. She didn't know how to respond. After all, the time of her appearance was really too bad for Ron. Lydia bit her lip lightly, feeling a little irritable. Through her own channels, as she learned more and more about Ron, Lydia became more and more suspicious that Ron might really be a prophet. Even if he is not a prophet, he should have a similar ability to see into the future. After generating this suspicion, Lydia had already planned to give up on assassinating Ron. She was even preparing to win over Ron and bring Ron back to the Spang Theocracy. After all, this ability to peek into the future would also be of great help to the Spang Theocracy. Crucial. She is trying to contact her father and the Pope for instructions. However, the entire Sykes Hotel was isolated by a layer of mysterious power, causing Lydia's contact to continue to fail. And Melville's private actions completely broke Lydia's plan. She once tried to stop it, but some kind of force sealed her room. It was not until just now that she finally left the room. But now, she has to stand on the opposite side of Ron. From the princess's point of view, Melville and Ron, whoever dies here will not make much difference in starting a war. But Melville really can't die. As the legitimate son of the Copperfield family, once he dies, the theocracy and the church will not know what price they will have to pay in order to appease the violent old patriarch of the Copperfield family. That person was one of the most powerful beings in the Spang Theocracy. Once he went berserk, the consequences would be disastrous. No one knew where the out-of-control old patriarch would vent his anger. Her eyes swept over Ron. Although she knew it was not the right time, Lydia still couldn't control the flush on her face. The feeling from before came to mind again. She was obviously still a pure girl, but she had already experienced almost all of these feelings. That feeling was extremely bad. The worst thing is that her consciousness and her soul are satisfied, but her body is still empty. Satisfied on one side and empty on the other, it constitutes a torture comparable to hell. She even said that she couldn't even control her body normally. She tried to use secret techniques to calm down her body, but the inexplicable sound coming from her lips due to torture always interrupted the spell. She felt as if there was a huge whirlpool that was constantly pulling her down. When I saw this man again, the urge to fall became even stronger. She didn't understand. She had obviously cut off the connection with that woman, but when she saw this man, her reaction was still so strong. The night wind blew by, and the cool feeling gave the witch goosebumps all over her body. Her little hands seemed a little out of control, and the tips of her fingers were trembling. There seemed to be some mysterious aura about this man that made her want to taste and feel it, tempting her to sink and fall. The same blessing from Celios, perhaps due to the previous consciousness manipulation technique, caused Lydia to connect with Aurelia, which made her feel far deeper than Dolores and Christian, and the influence was stronger. Taking a deep breath, Lydia used great perseverance to suppress the heat and impulse in her body, and stared at Ron with her scarlet eyes. "Mr. Ron, I apologize to you for what happened before. But Melville really can't die. You should know how terrible your grandfather is. He dotes on Melville the most. You know very well what consequences killing Melville will bring to you. Not only you, and even the friends and women around you, will inevitably be implicated. You don't want your lover to be in danger, right? This witch lady, did you come back from your childhood? I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.